Welcome back, everyone. It's BRAP. It's July the 9th. It is Wednesday night. This is actually our new time, Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. There may be some nights I broadcast at 8 p.m., but tonight we're live at 9 p.m. and got a lot to talk about. But first, I want to give a big hello and thank you to everyone in the live chat. Thank you so much for joining us this evening live. Please do me a favor, share the link on your favorite social media platform. Let everyone know we're going live and do the YouTube thing. Like, subscribe, and all that other good stuff. And we have with us returning guests. Joined me this past Saturday. And Falky, you are a man in demand today. But we do have David Faulkner Falky with us. Falky, how are you today, sir?
Doing quite well, thank you. How are you going? And I promise I'm in a much better mood than I was last weekend.
Yeah, I seem to remember you telling someone to bugger off. Not using those words though, but with the whole what was it? ARPU.
Yes, ARPU versus MAU. To clarify, I wasn't telling any specific individual to F off. I was reacting, as Australians do, to hearing a comment that is so ludicrous that we were basically saying, that's stupid, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
So, clash of cultures, but again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize until after you said it, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's not him saying that to someone. It's just like,
yeah.
I mean, we say get the F out of here.
Something like that.
That's, I mean, it's pretty much the equivalent, Falky. I mean, it's like, because we say like, oh, get the fuck out of here. Like, that's bullshit. That's kind of like the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
especially when you get those the New Yorkers with the heavy accent.
Yeah,
I always get a smile when I hear Jez saying that. Grinds my gears. Go, oh, it's funny. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, but no, great to have you back, Falky. And it's interesting because here we are with. I'm still seeing people confuse revenue, profits. People think MAU is more important than ARPU. I'm not an accountant by trade, but I know what ARPU and MAU is, and I know which one's more important. I also know the difference between revenue and profits.
Yes.
But here we are, nonetheless.
As I was saying to you off air before we started, is wait until we get into contribution margins and that sort of stuff. That'll make people's heads spin off their shoulders.
Exactly. But yeah, so fuck yeah, I know we have you on borrowed time here, and again, I know it's Thursday over there, so I want to be respectful of your time, but
yeah, all good.
Want to go into some comments by Christopher Dring, who I forget the name of his website now. I had it up here now. Is it Game Business? I think it's.
Oh no, he used to be at Game Biz. Was it?
GameIndustry.biz.
GameIndustry.biz. He used to be there. Now he's got his own show set up.
The Game Business. That's what it's called. The Game Business. Like yeah. He's got his own Substack and everything. So
yeah. Hey, look, props to him for having a crack.
Yeah, I mean, look, he actually just had a great interview with Peter Moore about the launch of the Xbox 360, which the 20th anniversary of that's coming up. One of my favorite consoles to date. I mean, Peter Moore for me is behind two probably my most favorite consoles in the Dreamcast and the Xbox 360. The 360 was just a phenomenal console. My it's interesting. I think we talked about this Saturday. My takeaway from the 360 and the original Xbox and where I felt Microsoft was most successful came to this one simple thing. Well, it's not simple. It's not easy to do. Because if it was easy to do, everyone would be successful doing it. But exactly. they focused on delivering great games. That's what really put those consoles on the map. And not that they didn't try the Xbox One, but the Xbox One then had its own problems and shuttering of first party studios and that kind of stuff. But he did have that interview with Peter Moore. But he was a little bit in the hot seat earlier this week, and where he said that basically he confirmed that Microsoft, as relates to whether Game Pass is profitable, or looking at or how they look at profitability within Game Pass, that they don't include the cost of first party development. Yeah.
Yep.
And then he got some additional context.
Imagine
Like,
that. Imagine
yeah,
that.
imagine that.
Imagine that. Sorry, I'm going to take 2 seconds to just go. I'm sure on this show and other shows that you and I have both been on, with several other people, have sat for the last better part of 5 or 6 years and said that they are not capturing all the costs associated with what goes into that service. Ergo, there's no way they can claim it is fully profitable. And we've shown with numbers available to the public through annual reports, annual comments, investor calls, and FTC documents that it is not possible for that service to be sustainable on its own and stand up as a profitable venture if all the costs associated with it are actually captured in that business unit and it was run as a true profit center. So I just want to take a moment to point that out.
Well, that is where and what's unfortunate is, I'd like to think we have more nuanced conversations like this, right? Where when you present these points, Falky, and you're the finance guru here on the show. That's why we have you on. Your expertise in finance, you understand
Yes.
The nuance that many of us don't. But and I remember, it's interesting because you just brought up a memory that I had when I think when I was first not necessarily introduced to you, but when I first heard you discussing the sustainability of Game Pass, it was through, and rest in peace, Optimus Code. Optimus Code had you on a I think it was a Twitter. What was those Twitter Spaces?
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
and you were going.
That came about because I was at the time listening to a Spaces that he was hosting, where they were having everyone was jumping in about Microsoft had just bought ZeniMax, and then they were going to buy Sega, and everyone was, yeah, they're going to definitely. I've heard it's happening. It's definitely happening. And then, as I adequately pointed out, I finally got to say something. I said, that's not going to happen because of these regulatory requirements. And Code reached out to me afterwards and said, oh, just curious to, what's your background? What are you doing? We had a chat about, what I do, my profession and what I've done, and, basically a credentials check. And I said, oh, people were starting to annoy me. I said, the guy about Game Pass, I said, I could tear that thing to pieces. And he went, could you? And I said, yeah, sure, no dramas. And then he said, well, prep the work, let's get it on there. Had the conversation and then had it peer tested in that Spaces by another person who works as a CFO in the healthcare industry in America. And I'm more than happy to have my assumptions and my work peer tested at any time, and I'm more than happy to do it in public.
That's right. I do remember the CFO came on that Spaces with Optimus Code. But anyhow, before I get to that, Falky, I want to welcome Hideo Kojima with us. Kojima, thank you for joining the show. It's great seeing you. I love the shades. How are you this evening?
Good, man. Good. How are you guys?
Doing well, Logic. I can't stop playing Death Stranding 2, by the way, and it is scratching that SimCity itch, which I'll get into later on the show. So Logic, we only have Falky for about an hour, so we're diving into the Chris String Game Pass sustainability conversation. But to your point, Falky, I mean, I know for years you've been kind of you've had this discussion about if you include everything, right? It begs the question, and I and I think unfortunately when you would bring that up, people would get upset and say, well, you're just hating on Game Pass. No, I think it certainly raises a level of scrutiny, and other folks in the industry have kind of raised questions too about it. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's Microsoft's, that's their bag, that's their thing to figure out. But I want to give you the floor here, Falky, about what Chris String said, and then kind of how Microsoft looks at Game Pass.
Yeah. So yeah, first off, Chris isn't an from my understanding, Chris isn't an expert in accounting and finance. He's
I don't believe
he's
he
a
is, no.
journalist first and foremost, and he's knowledgeable about some of the high level aspects of it. So what I'm about to say is no reflection of my personal professional opinion about Chris, and it's more just making comments around the information that he's put forth. So he put out the first part of the two-part was that it was confirmed that Game Pass, that Microsoft does not operate the Game Pass business unit as a true profit center or even a cost center, so to speak, because they don't include any allocation of first-party costs against the revenue, which we've all suspected for a long time. And so that triggered off a heap of people. And then he came out to clarify that when he checked up on it, the people he was talking to confirmed that internally they see that it is profitable. However, he's then gone on to say it's also considered profitable when you factor in the lost sales revenue for the games that would have otherwise been sold and all this other stuff, which means he's diverted away from profit conversation and he's moved into options analysis and economic assessments of whether something should be done or not. And that just caused mass confusion with people who don't know any different. And I will say this in trying to say this in a nice way. People don't know what they don't know. And as I was blowing up about before we got on air, there's a reason why accountants, to become a professor, like a certified senior professional accountant, there's a 3-year university degree plus another 3-year postgraduate of work and another 3 to 5 years of professional, like employed, mentored work just to get to that level. And so anybody who hasn't done it to sit back and go, oh, this is right, this is wrong because blah, blah, blah said, that's not always the case. It takes a fair bit of experience to be able to drill in to do the things like myself and others are able to do. And even then, it's like being in the medical professional. Some accountants specialize in tax, some specialize in cost center accounting, some specialize in governance work. Like we've all got minor specialties. My area of specialization is cost control, budgeting, and financial analytics for decision making. So this is in my wheelhouse. This is what I do every day and get paid to do, and consult on and provide advice for, and have done successfully for the better part of the last decade. However, what Chris has set up, what you got on the screen, is he's conflating a economic assessment piece, which is the lost sales, in conflating that in against a P&L construct. Now, if you're doing a proper profit center construct, you have all your money in and all the expenditure directly related to generating that money should be under accounting principles. And it doesn't matter if it's US GAAP, international accounting standards, or regional accounting standards. There's a matching principle, which is you match your expenditure against your revenue. So the money that it takes to generate the revenue that you're outgoing, if it's considered an expense, then it needs to be matched. And it needs to be matched within that business unit. And then you can look at the non-direct items. So like your sales, SG&A, sales and administration, marketing. You can then do your corporate allocations and your overhead charges and all the rest of that stuff. So that's why you have gross profit and net profit. And you have depreciation, amortization, all these other things. But when you take out or you don't match certain expenditures against the revenue generation, you're not talking about a true profit center. You're talking then about an internal management tool for tracking a certain metric to understand whether something is actually generating or contributing to your profit margins at the bottom end. As I was saying before, if the studios are run as true profit centers, they've got revenue that gets allocated to them, excluding the Game Pass revenue, subscriptions revenue. And then you've got all the costs of running the studio. They have a number at the bottom. And then that number at the bottom has to feed into paying for overheads and allocations and all the other stuff from the Microsoft corporate piece. And you hear me talk all the time about the corporate overhead kills small studios, is because they've got to fund a stupid amount into it. And so if all the studios have got that structure, Game Pass is just being looked at as, well, it's got the income from the subscription services, and we've got some direct costs in providing that service, which may just be the costs associated with the storefront and maintaining the storefront. And in which case, they're still not paying for the technology side, because that's still sitting over in professional cloud computing or whatever that business unit, that third of Microsoft business is. They're not paying for any of that tech. They're not paying for any of the storefront items that they have to related to the technology piece. So it's pretty much just some labor associated with any direct inputs and maybe some tech hardware costs associated with it. But remember, they run all this stuff off hardware and service centers and all that stuff that they're not paying for either. So that's not a profit center. That's a revenue center. It's an income stream center. It's basically saying, here's a gateway of money coming in, and it just sits over here on the side, and we have minor costs against it. But it's not a either full nor true profit center because it doesn't have the costs associated with providing it allocated in there. Now, this isn't incorrect. This is internal management, financial management tools, and it can be constructed to say, so they report in their quarterly reports, Game Pass or Xbox subscriptions or content and services revenue has gone up or down by this percent. They're tracking the revenue piece because if the cost base don't change and your revenue increases, the theory is that your profit margin improves. Now, if you're running at a loss and your profit margin improves, it means just having less of a loss. If you're running at profit overall and you increase your revenue, well, it should, increase your profit. But you've got, costs that go along with that. That's the accounting of it. When you're getting to doing the analysis of should we do option A, option B, or option C, that's when you have to factor in, if we do A and we miss out on the revenue, this much. So that's the opportunity cost of doing it. But that's never booked anywhere. That's never put in a ledger. It's never put into an account. That exists on a piece of paper for analysis because it's not actual cash out or the economic consumption of something. So it never hits a ledger. And that's where the main confusion piece is coming from when he's saying people have grabbed this Christopher Dring's second piece and gone, oh, see, it's still profitable even when you bring in the cost of lost game revenue. No, that's not how this works. And it's never how it's ever going to work. Opportunity cost is never booked in against a ledger anywhere. So if anyone thinks that is a win for them, you're wrong. Sorry, but you're wrong. You don't understand the concept. Please stop talking about it because you're only doing a disservice to yourself. And the other piece you've got there on the screen where he goes, it doesn't actually matter in real terms, but seeing the impact Game Pass was having on first-party games, the amount of money Xbox was spending on studios, he said he wanted to check the full impact of the service was being considered in their Game Pass as profitable line. Well, Game Pass can't be considered profitable in isolation then, because it's part of a broader service offering. And that's why you have all these different revenue streams come in and you all the expenditure, and when they wind it all together and you get this little number at the bottom within Xbox, and then they do that for the whole personal computing piece, and they stick out the accounts at the end of the quarter and the end of the year, and they say, hey, look, this is where it landed. Total revenue, operating income equals this, and that's the earnings per share amount after we pull out all the overheads and corporate SG&A and all the rest of it. And that's all that investors care about, because they want to know they're going to get more. Is their share price going to go up so they get a capital gain, or is their dividend going to go up so they get cash in hand? That's all the investors care about. But the internal management of running this thing, they don't care about what the investors want to see. They care about, are they hitting their KPIs? Is this thing tracking in the right direction? How much are we generating, and how much do we need to bring in to fund the further stuff? Yeah, that's just looking at profit and loss. There's this thing called a comprehensive income statement, which no one ever looks at, but you need to look at these things because that brings in what's happened on the balance sheet, not the P&L, to identify whether something's actually making a profit or not. That's why it's called a comprehensive income statement. And when you read those, you see all the stuff that's timing of, they only allocate revenue against games and play accounts based on the timing of when it's earned and all that other crap, or expenditures only done on certain points when we recognize it over a period of time. That's all accounting fun and trickery that we can do to try and make things look good at certain points. And it's all to do with this matching principle. But if you look at the comprehensive income statement and it pulls all that stuff off the balance sheet back into focus of, did they actually make any money or not? That's where you get a lot of that adjustment for, are they actually making money out of this by postponing revenue recognition or postponing expense recognition? And when you get to the bottom of that one, that number can look pretty horrible. And it does look very horrible for some supposedly profitable businesses that operate in the streaming space. Because as soon as you start bringing everything back to a focus of cash is king, things can get very dire very quickly. Again, that's why you got to check the cash flow numbers. Looking at net profit is never going to tell you if something is doing well or not. But in focusing all that, sorry, my ramblings focusing all that back to what Christopher's put up here. And I think and admirable for having a crack at it, because he's trying to clarify something that is a hot topic that a lot of people want to know. If you look at Game Pass in isolation, as it stands on how they're reporting it in this information tweets and writings, it is excluding a huge amount of costs that would otherwise need to be allocated against that generation of that revenue. So it's, as a true profit center, it's very unlikely. In fact, I would say to be damn near impossible that it's actually profitable in the sense of what true net profit would be, or even gross profit, it would be marginal based on what we know. But in terms of, is it as aiding to the profitability of Xbox, then of course it is, because it's a revenue stream. It'll always aid to the profitability of something if it's considered just the revenue stream. And if it's being considered in terms of net revenue as opposed to gross revenue and then having expenses taken off, and that's another argument that people never get right, is of course they can claim that it's profitable. They wouldn't even have to analyze it. They just say, oh, net revenue is positive. We're not paying money out we're not losing money by people subscribing because it's hitting the accounts as there's cash coming in the door, ergo it's profitable for us. Or, it's a moot point argument. If we don't have parameters around what it is we're analyzing, I said this in another tweet, is to put the parameters up to tell me what it is how you're assessing this. And the other individual just kept saying, this is the PR one that I was referring to. They just kept saying, I've seen the numbers and you're wrong. I've seen the numbers and you're wrong. I'm like, well, what parameters are you using to tell me that I'm wrong? Because I laid out my parameters and saying, revenue here, this is all the expenditure stuff that we know about and can assume pretty simply because of what it would cost to do this based off information that's at hand. It's not profitable. It's probably running somewhere between $300 and $500 million loss just on the numbers available at the moment. And he kept saying, nah, you're wrong. You're wrong. I've seen it. And you're wrong. Well, if he's seen a number of a percentage on a piece of paper without actually doing the deep dive behind to understand whether that number is true or not, and not true in the sense that it's, being doctored, just is it a true representation of this unit, then you can tell me I'm wrong to your heart's content. But I know how this stuff works. I do this every day. Unless you want to, engage and prove the parameters around which you're assessing it, you can tell me I'm wrong till the cows come home. I'm still not going to believe you.
So, Falky, anything else stand out to you with Chris String? Anything else that's worth mentioning or discussing?
Yeah, it's difficult. Again, it's difficult to criticize, and I'm not actually. I shouldn't say it's difficult to criticize. I'm not criticizing Chris because he's repeating what he's been told, and he obviously doesn't have the ability to publish the information clearly. But again, journalists wouldn't have a clue if they got into the nuts and bolts around how these things are constructed, and even senior management at C-suite level has got no clue half the time about how this stuff is constructed. They just look at percentages and key target points and numbers on a graph usually, and decide green good, red bad, and that they don't have the time. If you asked Phil, someone says, "Oh, Phil Spencer, can you tell us exactly how Game Pass is profitable?" He would have no clue. And then the level beneath him, the level beneath that person wouldn't have any clue either. You'd be down at like accounting manager for regional levels to try and to nut out exactly where things are at and get the metrics on it. But yeah, it's I'm not going to criticize Chris for repeating what he's been told, but again, without seeing the parameters around it, and without, Chris wouldn't have access to that level of detail anyway. And most people who are talking about this wouldn't even know what they're looking at if they got the access. So,
Yeah.
and I'll give you an idea. A particular global company that I worked for, and top 5 global producer in their industry, Asia Pacific region had 55,000 accounts. Just in the Asia Pacific region, in their general ledger, 55,000
How
accounts.
many? Oh my gosh.
55,000 accounts across.
How many people manage that?
The Australian accounting team was 42 people. That was just the accounting team. Then they
Yeah.
had 20 financial analysts out at the facilities. Regional head office had 60 accountants working out of Thailand. And that didn't include America. That's the Asia Pacific, excluding the Americas and South, the Americas continent. So it was just East and Southern Asia and Australia and New Zealand, Singapore, etc. That probably had 250 something accountants in total just in the region. And yeah, massive teams doing the consolidations and all the rest of it. But again, when you're winding all these dollars and cents up in the billions of dollars and these massive big programs that do it all, you need to have everything set up and structured, and the cost centers right and the profit centers right and all that sort of stuff. But 55,000 general ledger accounts across 20 something countries and something like 350 or 400 cost centers. And it's massive stuff. And when you get those reports and into those spreadsheets and into those systems, it's really, if you don't know what you're doing, you'll get lost in a hurry. But it's not wrong for businesses to say, we just want to look at this revenue stream as a gross point. We're not going to worry about the expenditure associated, or we're not going to allocate expenditure to it internally, because when we roll it all up and send it out to the investors don't care. So why should we spend the time? But that's an internal management decision. Again, the way that they look at it is not necessarily how it would be reflected if you want to talk about Game Pass being a profitable under its own steam. And if it's not being discussed in that manner, stop saying that it's profitable in isolation, because it's not. And the Wall Street Journal conversation that Phil Spencer had, where he blah, 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 our Game Pass subscription revenue is about 10 to 15% of our total gaming revenue, and that's profitable for us. That's profitable for us is the comment. Is it Game Pass is profitable for us because of how we view it internally, or Game Pass is profitable for us because that's what it's contributing to our overall revenue? And when we don't allocate all these costs to it, and the costs are held over here, and they got much slimmer margins, and this thing's looking at a great margin, when you bundle it all together and get a number at the bottom, and that number's positive, great. But the amount of people that get on social media and on their podcasts and on their shows and all the rest of them, they hammer it home. And we've been copping it for years. Game Pass is the best thing. Game Pass is the best. Get everything on Game Pass. Game Pass is great value. Game Pass is that. And we say, well, it's not profitable and it's not sustainable because of these reasons. It's being funded from off the books outside that unit somewhere. Ergo, it's not going to stand on its own 2 feet. And then people get mad and say, well, yes, it is because Phil said so. Well, Phil wouldn't fucking know. He's just being told the number that's put in front of him. And he doesn't care if it's how the accounting's done for it. All he cares about is that the overall number at the bottom of his area of responsibility is meeting the target he's been set. He doesn't even have any say in it half the time. And then they carry on a bit, why do people care if Game Pass is profitable or not? Well, look what happened last week. That's what happens when something's not profitable. And that happening in conjunction with other comments made around, the Amy Hood's given a number that is unrealistic, and then insider journalists with insider connections arguing about that.
I don't agree with that assessment that that's some unrealistic expectation. But go ahead.
I think it's a perfectly realistic expectation, because someone lied to someone.
Well, when you spend $80 billion and you're underperforming, I mean, I think,
now they don't have that cash on hand 2 years later to go and chase down their AI stuff. Again, I won't get into that piece.
Well, Falke, I did hear you. It's interesting because during the ABK acquisition conversation, I do distinctly remember you saying something to the effect that it's probably best for them, or maybe the investors would prefer them investing in maybe AI infrastructure, Azure. There was something there you mentioned. Now I'm forgetting, but something allocating that money elsewhere. Where Microsoft could probably get more bang for their buck. Do you remember? Was that around Azure or AI? I don't remember.
Yeah. So they had cloud data centers that needed massive maintenance work to get them ready to do the AI stuff, and they were starting to trail. They were showing signs of trailing well behind in AWS and Google for their cloud infrastructure offerings. And now you can see Google's made a massive step forward in their business offerings for their cloud, their complete solution. So the Azure and Microsoft 365 option is not the only game in town anymore, even though at the moment it is still the easier one to get because it's got a broader suite. But if you're a small, medium enterprise, you don't need to go down the Microsoft headache. You can do the Google dance and be just as good off. And that's, at the time, I'm saying they need to not muck around in this zone. They will fuck it up. Microsoft trying to manage a gaming studio like a business to business is not going to work. Phil doesn't know what he's doing in terms of getting games out the door because content is king. He's buying all these studios and getting all this IP to sit on his hands and do nothing with it because it's going to take forever to get out there. A blind man who spoke to Jesus could see this was going to be the outcome, which was either going to be no games coming or mass layoffs, and we've ended up with both. It's not rocket science if you listen to the people who know what they're talking about and know what they're looking at. But it just seems that, as I said before, people don't know what they don't know, and they are adamant that they are right, and they won't listen to people because they're saying something they don't like hearing, and then they get mad and upset about it. If that thing is profitable that you've got on the screen, as has been suggested, and as people are dying on those hills to adamantly be, it's profitable because they said so, why did they lay off, thousands of people, shut down studios and cancel games last week? It's clearly not as profitable as people think. Oh, and they carry on about, the live service switch for PlayStation, because I'm not going to pile on Xbox alone. I'll get into PlayStation about this. PlayStation made a massive misstep thinking they could do something that wasn't going to live up to their quality standards, and they tried it and they failed. And in
live
doing
service,
so, they chewed into their profit margin, and people shat on them for it. Look at how poor PlayStation's profit margin is. Look at how horrible their profit margin is. They cancel 50 to 60 games a year easy, and people only cried about the 8 or 9 live service games that got canned because they're high profile, high public. PlayStation and Jim Ryan made a conscious decision to chew into their profit margin.
Hold on,
Falky,
let me interrupt you real quick, because I that's actually one of the things I want to talk about tonight. And how much time do you have? Because I wanted to get, I was hoping to get your perspective on that too, because it's something that I heard that I heard Colin Moriarty on Broken Silicon talk about. He discussed this, and I always forget the host of that podcast. I keep calling him Doug, but that's not his name. But before we do that, Logic, did you have any other any additional thoughts? I did see you did put out some tweets about Chris Drink's comments about the profitability and such for Game Pass.
Yeah, I think most of my thoughts have the same root rationale as Falky's. My interpretation of them isn't exactly in sync. The way I articulate it is that accounting, as far as like what you submit to the SEC and what goes on, like your GAAP compliant balance sheets, is often and largely a matter of how a corporation decides to make things look. And that is the reason why that's the reason why there are SEC rules that allow, like, Microsoft decides what business units it reports on and which ones it doesn't, right? The SEC gives them that latitude, right? They were the ones who decided, what operating segments they were going to report on, and they are able to organize and structure themselves from a financial perspective, so that there are things that they don't necessarily reveal. So I think a lot of times, in particular the gaming community, gets hyper focused on what is in earnings reports and what's reported as like that's the thing that is. And I'm like, kind of like Falky saying, no, that's the way we structure things, right? So that it appears a certain way. Internally, as Falky mentioned, right, there are other formats of analysis. There are other discussions that need to be made. And one of the most pertinent things is what he said, right? At the end of the day, numbers are provided so that a person who has the responsibility to make decisions has the information to make those decisions, right? And so I don't necessarily like the lost revenue argument, but what I will say is that ever going to be on an accounting ledger, right? On an SEC submission? No, because opportunity costs, as Falky mentioned, aren't. That's not the way we account for them. On an internal analysis, right, inside a conference room, with somebody charged with making a decision at the heads of the table, that person is going to ask, hey, if we do this, and I often talk about, like, all those conversations are a matter of goes into and goes out as, right? And what levers can I pull? What dials can I turn? Right? What knobs do I have at my dispense? What things do I have underneath my control? Which is one of the reasons why I've often been critical of the GLT and Phil Spencer, because underneath the Xbox umbrella is a huge amount of things that weren't originally in that business unit, right? Such as like DirectX. But internally, those are the things that are going to be looked at. And so that's where the most granular and hyper-specific financial analysis gets done, because I have to know what I'm spending money on, what's actually earning me money, what's costing me money. And so when you go back to, say, for instance, the iPhone example, right? Apple yea verily knew that the iPhone was cannibalizing iPod sales. But you're never going to find that in an earnings report, right? You're never going to find that in an earnings report, in a quarterly earnings report presentation. But Apple was absolutely looking at that, and absolutely looking at where on the graph was the iPhone going and where on the graph was the iPod going. And then you break that down to even more in terms of resources, in terms of what engineers are allocated to what project, and inventory and supply chain pipeline and all those types of things. So the notion of lost revenue is definitely an opportunity cost in a cannibalization metric that is going to be looked at to make those decisions. My key thing about, is Game Pass profitable? My personal feeling is again, this is something that the gaming community hyper focuses on, that in my opinion doesn't really matter. If I'm the head of a business unit and in charge of P&L, at certain levels in the C-suite, people aren't going to care whether or not an individual revenue stream is profitable as a standalone by itself. What matters is the roll-up. What matters is my business unit. Now, if my business unit has problems such as not making enough margin or underperforming some metric that is something that I wind up having to report to Wall Street, then yes, I'm going to start picking at that thread. I have never felt that Game Pass's profitability really mattered, because it's not a matter of we did Game Pass so that we could be bonga profitable, right? They did Game Pass to get a finger on the cliff's edge to hang on for dear life and prevent them from going over. We often talk on this show and on other podcasts about the difference between KPIs and OKRs. And sometimes the OKR, the market objective, is more important than the KPI. Sometimes things are an investment. So the entire conversation, quite frankly, around the profitability of Game Pass, to me, isn't really that impactful or really that relevant. What matters is it helping the business go? If it is an investment, is it a helpful investment? And is it allowing Xbox to be an effective gaming company? And I think absolutely it is. We talk about Nintendo, we talk about PlayStation, we talk about Xbox, and all three of them are targeting slightly different demographics of gamers, right? PlayStation is going for the high end, it's a prestige brand. It's going for the luxury demographic, the people who, quite frankly, don't mind paying, right? But the people who also associate high quality with that notion of paying.
Yeah.
Nintendo is going for people who primarily care about entertainment, who care about family-friendly content without having to give it too much thought. Obviously, people who are hyper concerned about mobility, and not super wrapped around the axle about frames per second and 4K resolution. Xbox is courting a different demographic of player. they're looking for players who might be interested in playing their content on multiple different platforms and multiple screens. They're going after people who may not be wrapped around the axle about what hardware they're playing on. They're going for the value player who's looking for biggest bang for the buck. This is a conversation we often have, like in GPU land, right? And Nvidia typically goes for the people who don't mind paying. But then as you drill down between SKUs between AMD and Nvidia, there are some, and same thing for CPUs, right? There are always those SKUs that give you the biggest bang for the buck, and that's the things that lots of people go for. And Game Pass, right, in that analogy, isn't that different. The other thing I'll say about Drink's comments, there's a lot of things that got twisted when he put it out, right? A lot of people who took one thing that he said and ran with it, right? And the sum of what he said really is that the costs of first party development are not allocated to or not included in the phrase Game Pass is profitable. And on that point, I think Falky agrees, it never would be. You would never take a capital expense, an investment that you've got to then amortize over years for an asset that you're going to sell or gain revenue from and allocate it to your subscription service when it is gathering revenue through other streams. Also, I mean, that if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think I am, the way Microsoft is structured and the way most companies are structured, those things are projects, and they roll up to programs, and they roll up to larger portfolios, and those portfolio leads at some level in various tiers within the organization are responsible for P&L. Now, internally, I know and would trust that there are arguments and discussions between different P&L managers about how much they're spending and is coming out of their budget to help another P&L manager. One of the arguments I used to make for my office that was setting up cloud infrastructure and doing R&D projects for the benefit of other people, one of the things I used to rant and rave about is like, look, if I build something for you and you take that and you go to market and I was your incubator, then at some point your revenue that you're having coming in, like, I should get some credit for that. So in another instance, I was talking to Falky about it today. There are different factions within corporations, right? The marketing guys were briefing to senior leadership that this partnership we were going into with one of the big cloud service providers was profitable because they weren't including all of the costs that were associated with it. But when myself and the chief financial analyst briefed, we had in our slide deck all of those additional costs, everything we were doing for R&D, all of the labor that was going in to setting up this lab and building out the infrastructure, all the money that was being allocated to make the facility secure, etc. So there are differences between what goes on balance sheets and what gets interpreted internally in terms of what investments are actually making money, or what investments are actually primarily being used to gain market share.
Hey, Falky,
it's an important distinction to make.
Mm-hmm.
Just because internal business point says, this, without knowing the parameters and without knowing how they've done it, it doesn't mean that they're lying to investors, because those things get audited. And there's some flexibility around accounting process and all that, but the main crux of it is you have some flexibility in the matching and timing, but when you put it all into one pot, as long as you've got all the revenue earned in that time period matched against all the expenditure required to do it, with some directly required, and then you get some freedom in how you allocate. And then Microsoft says this in their accounting notes, in their financial statements, every quarter and every year. We match, revenues are allocated based on where they're generated from, and we may just have it all sitting in one spot. And we match expenditures based on, depending what they are, revenue percentage, headcount allocation, or some other means as we weight and determine. And then the number at the bottom of that is either positive or negative. And because then you've got, that's your gross point. Then you've got depreciation, amortization, financing costs, balance sheet points, costs, and then all your overhead componentry and allocations and all that sort of crap. It gets you to a net position. The way it's presented in the financial statements, US GAAP requirement, is they blend it all under personal computing. So it's not just Xbox. You've got Home 365, LinkedIn, bang, half a dozen other ones, all blended in when they pump that number out at the bottom. They're not lying to investors when they produce those reports, but how they split it up internally and how they track it internally, it's nothing wrong with saying all the first party studio costs are borne by the first party studios and none of it gets allocated to Game Pass. And likewise with saying all the costs associated with running the Azure servers and the cloud servers and all the other stuff that Xbox uses and all the technology that Xbox uses, we don't apportion any internal costs across for that because we'd have to eliminate it upon consolidation. So we just don't bother doing that. And it all sits over there in professional cloud services or whichever one it's in. That doesn't mean it's wrong internally. It doesn't mean that it's wrong on the external reporting either. It just means that when you're having the conversation around is something as a business unit or a business offering profitable, without those things allocated, you can't say that it is. But again, when Phil Spencer says it's profitable to us, well, it might be generating to their underlying profit margin or their underlying profitability. But that doesn't mean it's profitable in isolation. And it certainly doesn't mean it's sustainable in isolation. So, and yeah, they're not breaking any rules by doing it, but it's not exactly leading the horse to water if they're doing it accurately. So anyway, apologies. I got to have to jump off for the next one. All right. Thank you for letting me rant and carry on.
Well, yeah. I was hoping you'd answer this one question in the chat, Falky, but I know you got to go. So
it depends.
Not really a question, but I just it looks Centurion got. I would say take a little bit of emotion out of this. No one is saying that Game Pass is bad or not successful. We're just having a more, I guess, nuanced conversation. That's why I had Falky join the show today, given his background. That's why Logic's here, given his background. So, but Falky says you people are not experts. You're not in the industry. Obviously, Microsoft's succeeding enough to keep Game Pass and produce games. That's not the kind of conversation that we're having here. Centurion, Falky, any closing thoughts on that particular comment in the chat?
I've been called a lot worse by a lot better people than that.
So,
not an expert.
Yeah.
Huh. I wish I could tell a few people that I'm about to go and have a conversation with that I'm not an expert and they can find someone else to do the job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the things I'll say, again, I am not an accounting by profession, but I'm consistently surrounded by accountants, auditors, and analysts. And one thing I am aware of is that for the most part, fundamentals of accounting are pretty much consistent across industries. I mean, there's some nuance to different industries, but mostly the fundamentals of accounting apply across multiple industries. And that would be the same here for this conversation as relates to gaming.
That's why all the standards within the different regions have to reconcile themselves back to the international accounting standards, and we all have to abide by them. Again, as I said at the start, it's not like you do a 5-minute Google search and suddenly you know what you're talking about. People have got 7, 8, 10 years plus to get to the levels of experience and expertise that myself and others are at. We do this day in, day out, and it doesn't matter if we're in the gaming industry, the construction industry. It doesn't matter really what industry you're in. The only difference is that you have more knowledge of the operation of the industry to be able to make those creative accounting decisions in a better manner, to be able to better bespoke your reporting for your internal management. But in terms of US GAAP reporting, that's the same. Doesn't matter what country you're in.
Yeah.
Accounting standards are the same no matter what country you're in. And the concepts of accounting, so profit and loss, income statement, comprehensive income statement, changes in equity, balance sheet account, they're the same everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you know how that stuff works in detail, it's easy to reverse engineer from a set of accounts and statements and other information that's available how things are actually done. And then when you get a sneak behind the curtain, as Chris is pointing out, they're saying it doesn't include this. Well, that just illustrates or confirms what we thought already anyway. So,
well, that was always the question, Falky, around Game Pass. Like, when you factor in the cost of associated with development, And I think Chris String mentions that like too, like it puts pressure on their first party studios to be, you know, in terms of profitability for first party. When you think about cannibalization of you know, of software sales, and I think this is a big reason too why we see the pivot today. Why they're putting their games and much success to them too. By the way, putting their games on PlayStation. I mean, they're selling well, but that's a big reason why they. Yeah,
but I want to.
Sorry, I got to jump. Sorry.
Yeah. All right. Talk, see.
I don't know that perspective is quite squared where I think it is. I don't think putting their games on other platforms, I don't think is a matter of Game Pass. Putting their games on other platforms is because they only have 35 million people on Xbox Series. Right. So it doesn't, at a certain point, you're right, you would argue, I don't know that it even makes sense for them to make games for Xbox, right? Nearly as much as it makes sense for them to make games for PlayStation, where there are 78 million, right, customers who are higher ARPU, so higher valued customers. And some of their games are even going to PlayStation 4, right? Because there's a not insignificant number of people on that platform as well who are buying games. So yeah, I mean, I feel like the move to put their games on other platforms is much more about market share and less about Game Pass. I also think the pressure on the first party studios, while profitability might be an issue or a challenge, or or something that they need to improve upon, I think much more so is the associated schedule pressure that the subscription service brings in terms of how it alters the optic that they put on when they ship a game, right? That there's more of an incentive to go ahead and ship, knowing that it's going into Game Pass, knowing that while there might be defects and bugs in it, it's still partially contributory towards revenue, more so than you might have in the shipping decision for a game that's just going on sale and isn't being used to drive a subscription service. The imperative to kind of constantly put content into a subscription service is inevitably and invariably going to be part of the dynamic, right? When you guys get in the room for a shipping discussion, and some of the parameters that you might normally hold to, which might be, certain amount of bugs being discovered, certain amount of bugs being squashed, those things may not hold as much traction as just the need to ship to get something into the subservice.
All right, Logic, I do want to move on to NPD. I keep calling it NPD, but Circana. You pull up the screen here.
Hey, I want to address Centurion for one last time, because I think the pushback on the jabs that he's gotten is completely disingenuous. So your statement, just chill, I have a right to share my opinion, as do you, so stop trying to hurl little pretty jabs. Centurion, I would have never said a word to you if it weren't for you coming in here trying to poke your finger in our eye, right? And not on any objective basis, simply on the basis that you didn't like what we were saying, and simply on the basis of you trying to assert, this is what I call the null hypothesis, right? The accusation that because you guys are absent of omniscience and are not all knowing, that therefore you cannot have an opinion. No, that's not how it works. So I'll stop hurling pretty little jabs at you, or petty little jabs at you, if you stop coming in here acting like a clown. Just settle down, participate in the discussion. If you disagree with us, I'm completely fine with us if you disagree with us, right? If you have an objective piece of information to offer that gives you a reason that your disagreement is based on. Simply coming in here saying, well, you guys aren't in the industry, you guys are in the room, you guys don't know. And also all of the many insults that went along with that. That's why you're getting petty jabs, because you came in here being a jerk.
Yeah, I mean that's fair logic. That great point, Logic. Thank you for addressing that. So Troy, Logic's right. I mean, you immediately came in here and said we're not experts. That's a jab. That doesn't disprove anything we say. But by you insinuating or saying that we're not experts, I mean, you don't know what Falky does professionally. You don't know what Logic does professionally. You don't know what I do professionally. Falky is as I often refer to him as a bean counter. He understands a lot of this more than you do, I would imagine. But yeah, I mean, look, you're welcome to stay here and have a conversation, but we're not gonna do what you're doing here in the live chat. And I think that's why some of the folks in live chat, to Logic's point, have thrown jabs back at you. I think someone told you to have a Capri Sun and relax. Maybe that's in order. But anyhow, so Kratops, someone said, Kratops says, yo, it's Kojima. Hey, Logic, let me ask you, have you, I think you were playing Expedition 33 last night on the PC. Have you gone back to Death Stranding 2?
I have not gotten back to Death Stranding 2, and I'm gonna continue going back with Centurion for God.
Okay.
Well, you're literally nitpicking about me and what is it?
About Microsoft and their decisions.
Oh yeah, you're literally nitpicking about Microsoft and their decisions. And my response to that is, so? I mean, are you a Microsoft employee? Do you have a relative that works at Microsoft? Is there some reason you're personally offended by us doing a financial assessment and a business assessment on Microsoft? A non-person entity, right, who is a financial organization participating in the business world. So again, Century forgot, who cares? I'm also not a football player. Am I not allowed to make comments on my favorite football team?
I make comments about the Washington Commanders, pre new ownership.
So why you're getting heat is because you're coming in here on a gaming podcast and telling us that we're not allowed to talk about Microsoft. And I can only assume that that's because you're an Xbox fan. Or I don't know what your emotional damage is, but I would suggest you go seek help, because I don't get it. You came onto a gaming podcast asking us not to talk about the gaming industry. That does not seem like the most prudent use of your time.
No, it doesn't. And he says he loves video games. Go play video games then.
Right. This isn't a review show. I mean, we'll talk about the games that we're playing, certainly at some point. I mean, again, it would be a different thing if you came in here and said, hey, I came in here to talk. I came in here to hear about games, and here you guys are talking about the industry. And we would just simply tell you, yeah, there are games that are review shows, and primarily like my own show spends 50% of our airtime talking about games, right? In a fairly limited, or probably more than 50%.
I'm sorry, Logic. Hold on a sec. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we need the mods to we need. Yeah, you're not gonna do that. You're not gonna talk like, you're not gonna come here and say that to us because I don't know, you're feeling some kind of weird way. Yeah, mods, can you guys take care of Nate or Priscilla? Please take care of Centurion. Just kindly show him the door, because we're not going to do that.
Yeah, I gave him a 5-minute timeout if somebody wants to take more extreme action than that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like, you don't come here and say that. I mean, that's just like, yeah. Now you're being a kid. Yeah,
I don't get it.
Yeah, don't be a baby. Don't be a baby about video games and a company that has no like I don't want to rant, but
what I don't get, like, I mean, I'm just making this comment for the sake of everybody else in the audience or people who come by. Like, look,
yeah,
if you came in here and had an objective statement, right, a piece of evidence, a thing you wanted to point us to disagree with our opinion, with our perspective, with our findings, with our assessment, you can absolutely do that, right? You can come in here and you can say, well, look, 35 million subscribers or so on Game Pass is proof that obviously, there's interest in it in the market. And I would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have agreed with that.
I've always said, strategically for Microsoft, right, this is a good thing. Part of what they do is they're a services company, right? So a lot of it makes sense. I will admit there is a faction, a cabal right out there of people who are anti-Game Pass. I'm not anti-Game Pass.
None of us are anti-Game Pass. By the way, it's funny, like everyone, I don't know about you, Logic, but I'm in the Game Pass ecosystem. And many of the folks that we have on the show are subscribed to Game Pass. So I mean, but coming in and being dismissive through by insulting us that's not the way to have a conversation, and unfortunately that's what we see on the internet, and that's what we see in other live chats where if you say something someone doesn't like, they the first thing they do is lob insults.
They get angry.
They get it because they can't put together a cohesive argument.
Yeah. It's a weird. And one other thing I want to say on that topic before we move on to the next one. I'm sorry I've been holding you up. I think I was either on Gaming Circle podcast, or maybe one time when I dropped by the Discord or something, or maybe somewhere else. I don't know.
That was a great show on Saturday, but I really did enjoy the conversation with the panel. That was a good conversation. Yeah.
There was somebody who made an accusation. It may have. I'm not sure who it was. Maybe it was Erodimus. I don't know. There's someone who made the accusation that when other companies have done what Microsoft did, right, in terms of the layoffs, right, what Xbox did in terms of the layoffs, that we didn't have the same opinion. There wasn't this large outcry. And again, here I am sitting here, starting to get angry and frustrated because I repeatedly talk about gamers who do not know their history of the gaming university. Please, did I say the gaming university, gaming history of the industry? Right?
You said gaming university, yeah.
So please stop coming in here to participate in discussions in an angry manner, right, with pushback, when you haven't done the due diligence of the gaming industry history. Did other companies get smoke for making large acquisitions, numerous acquisitions, and then laying people off? Abso-flippin-lutely. One of the hugest reasons EA carried the moniker being the worst thought of company in the United States was because of it, and Activision, right, having this voracious appetite for going around and making acquisitions, holding onto those companies, sometimes not even long enough for them to put a game out, and then shutting them down. For a decade, that was a trope of the fear of what would happen when you would get acquired by EA and Activision. Activision acquired one of my favorite gaming studios in Bizarre Creations, who was responsible for the Project Gotham racing series. And I played hundreds of hours of PGR 3 and 4 on the Xbox 360. It was one of the things that really caused me to adhere to the platform was the time I spent in those games, but also all the relationships that I built on Xbox Live, playing with other people who were hardcore into racing. Like literally coming home from work, like ordering a pizza before I left work so it would be there when I got home, sitting down at my 360, with the pizza next to me, logging into Xbox Live with my friends at like 7:00, right? And literally sometimes playing. I mean, there were some nights that I played until daybreak the next morning. Activision came along and acquired them. They put out one game, Blur, and then they shut the studio down.
Blur was a good game.
And I'm like, so now in perpetuity, there will never be there's never going to be another Project Gotham Racing, one of my favorite series of the time.
There won't be, no.
Right. So big gaming companies who came along, right? We gave Embracer heat for like 3 years. Right.
When they were buying up everyone.
Yeah.
We just recently talked about Bungie and some of the issues there on the show.
So it's just weird to me when in the name of fandom people assert that, but when Xbox does it, then we treat it no, we don't. You just choose not to remember because you're more concerned about defending them than actually holding them accountable. All right, sorry. That's my last. No,
sermon. I mean it's just unfortunate because it's the response is never a counterpoint. It's always like a personal attack or some kind of straw man argument, right? That's and we don't do that here. So
bless the 011 went straight for my heart with the Nokia purchase. You must have stopped by the podcast before and know that I'm a Windows Phone guy. But yeah, let's not. Yeah, you talk about all the years that the Xbox fans called Lena Khan the sleeper agent. The true sleeper agent was Stephen Elop, like who was actually a Microsoft executive, right? Who left the company to work for Nokia, then got Nokia acquired, and then shut Nokia down. Right? So,
I mean, he talk about a cash grab. But yeah, no, that's just anyhow. Yeah, Death Stranding 2. So you haven't gone back and to play that yet.
No, I just put in a couple hours on it. I think I put in like about 4 hours on it. But then I put it down and got distracted by other stuff and haven't gotten back to it yet. But I will. It's very near the top of the queue of stuff I need to loop back to.
Yeah, so Death Stranding 2, it's taking me away from my game of the year, Expedition, Claire Obscure Expedition 33. And I probably spent about an hour or so last night gathering resources to build roads. Logic. That's where I'm at with this game right now. And I was actually doing a mission earlier today where I had to go rescue someone, and you can actually, like, where the I forget what they're called. They're the, like, printers or whatever they're called that are used to build the roads. You can actually check like what resources they need or how many more resources, like pieces of metal or I forget what the other resources you need to build the roads, but you could scan them and see what they need. So but I literally have on this mission turned back around, went back to the Magellan, grabbed more resources to build a road. And this game it's got its hooks in me. I was joking around with someone earlier today. I said, this is scratching my SimCity 2000 itch where I'm building stuff.
Yeah. And I think a lot of gamers and a lot of people in the gaming industry, like, are dismissive of the power of the Zen and the meta.
Yeah, absolutely. 110%.
And I mean, I'll definitely say, like, the games I have the greatest attachment to, right, are those games, right? The games that put me in a Zen kind of OODA loop, the games that put me in a meta OODA loop, where the reasons I'm playing the game, the things that are keeping me engaged in the game are this meta activity that are not really like the core, right, of the gaming campaign. But it's something that just hooks me and that I stay engaged in. It causes me to be interested in, like, doing, this series of activities, like, over and over and over again in the game. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so it's interesting because with Death Stranding, so there's been other games where, like, you have side missions, right? Like Assassin's Creed, Baldur's Gate 3, any open world game, right? Ghost of Yote, but Ghost of Tsushima. There's always, like, side quests for these big action adventure open world or semi open world games. And those don't always, like, except for maybe The Witcher and a couple other games I could think of. Like, I tend not to do the side missions just because I don't want to deal with them. But there's something different about Death Stranding 2 for me. Like, even just building roads, collecting resources, that's never really something I've wanted to do, but it's relaxing for me to do it. It's just weird. And it kind of reminds me of, like, that feeling I had, and I put a lot of time in SimCity 2000. Like I remember I would spend hours, like up to like 2 a.m, Logic, just building cities or mapping out cities or streets or tearing down, streets and erecting new housing and upgrading my power grid, making sure the citizens had adequate water and, messing around with taxes. Like, I spent hours and just building the roads. I just get a lot of satisfaction out of it. And then with this game, and I think what I really like about it is, like, if I want to jump into something a little more action oriented, I have the ability to do that. If I want to go. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And what I mean, and I think you're getting to, like side missions is, and I'm not like marginalizing like your gameplay of side missions or people who are interested. Like, side missions is a more kind of overt expression of a kind of side piece activity, right, for you to engage in a game. And it has like metrics around it, right? There's X number of side missions and they're going to take you X amount of time, and that's, in your how long to beat number, right? That's part of it. The meta in the Zen is, to me, like a deeper, more subsurface layer of engagement that I think kind of burrows under your skin for certain gamers, like a little more than kind of an overt side mission. and that to me is also the surprise and the wonder. Like when you realize, right, at a certain point, like, oh crap, like I've been putting, like, X amount of time into whatever. Starfield, kind of hooked me in that a large chunk of my 40 something hours or whatever that I spent in the game was spent because I had built this little outpost right out on the outer
Yeah.
reaches of known space, where
Mhm.
I was kind of constantly mining and warehousing stuff. And I would just, every 2 or 3 missions, right, I would go back to it, right, and I would put up
Yeah.
more structures, and I would, monitor whether or not I was still getting minerals from the deposit on the conveyor belt right to the storage facility, and like all that kind of stuff. So yeah. Hey, you got a huge super chat too.
Yeah, I got to grab this. This is wow. Ghost in the Garage Gaming with the $100 super chat. Wow. Thank you so much. That is huge. That means a lot. I really appreciate that. It says, what's up, Rap and Logic? For me, Death Stranding 2 is a relaxing, thought-provoking, almost cathartic experience. So yeah, thank you again, Ghost in the Garage, for that super chat. Really, really appreciate it. I think the other thing for me with this game is that it's like Kojima games are like, and Nib was talking about this the other when we had him on last. Like you have these bombastic characters. Kojima games seem to be a little weird at times, but some of the I don't want to describe it. Like I think in this game with the characters like Fragile and Dead Man and Die Hard Man and even seeing like Higgs, right, who's played by oh my gosh, what's his name now, Troy Baker. There's just like this just those characters for me elicit a lot of emotion. There's a lot of emotional depth to these characters. They have very unique background stories that I don't know, that I just don't get from other games. Or presented the way Kojima does. Like again, they're like, some of these characters are weird, but there's a lot of depth to them. It's just interesting. Like it is a great game. I don't know if this game's going to be my game of the year. We'll see. But I'm really enjoying it. Like it's been a great experience. And it actually, I think what's great too with this game, it's actually, where I think the first game was a little more walking sim. This one's definitely more action stealth. There's more like combat tools. Incorporates a lot of that sandbox from Metal Gear Solid 5, the last Metal Gear game that he did. So
yeah, I mean, right. I forget. Yeah, I forget where I was and what conversation I was having. Somebody was asking me a question about Kojima, and I mentioned I think he there's a certain level of like deep insight that he has into kind of like human nature, but also in the dynamics between like different archetypes and personality types, right? Within a, like, he has a keen eye for turning his mind on, hey, if I have this small collection of human beings and you have these numbers of people with these different sets of motivation, like how does that play out? Like the game theory of a small scale social network, and he in large scale, right? Because a lot of his kind of dystopian or near future scenarios, right, often kind of play themselves out in real life. So yeah, he seems to have a pretty good knack for that.
Is he the GOAT, Logic? Jeff Keighley seems to think so. I think he's a creative genius. I really, to your point, like his ability to like explore like different like human connections, right? And that's what comes to mind when I think of Death Stranding 2. Like there's grief in this game. I mean, there's big grief in Metal Gear, but the way he explores, the way he presents it, I don't know if I've had those experiences with other games. I mean, nothing really comes to mind right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's not sleep on Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which,
I mean, that is true. That's a good point.
For me, I mean, as good as Death Stranding 2 are, I found more depth in that, but that's also because I have things in my personal life that cause me to relate to the Stranding games, but I think I had more right when it comes to Clair Obscur. So, I mean, is he the GOAT? I think it's in this industry you have it's just like to me it's like movies, right? There's always this contention between commerciality, appealing to the mainstream and the masses, and creatives who are more auteur, right, and more kind of house style.
I would say Kojima's more auteur, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's the only thing.
Yeah.
It's like, can he come up with kind of like really crazy creative ideas and pull them together and execute on them? Yes, absolutely. Do they appeal across a wide range of gamers? Some of his stuff has, some of his stuff hasn't. I kind of think, unfortunately, in much the same way as like Orson Welles, like I don't know that me personally, that I can land on, is he the GOAT, right, until his career is kind of over and we look backwards at his collective works.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, he's definitely in the running and definitely doing, great things for those of us who, his games hit the chord. I mean, I guess like Death Stranding definitely hits like a smaller band of gamer than the Metal Gear Solid stuff. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Even though Metal Gear had its kind of quirky characters, Death Stranding is definitely a bit more I don't know, weird, I guess. Like you literally have a talking doll in this game. and honestly, like I think the only person who could probably pull that off is Kojima. But yeah, I definitely do think that the Metal Gear Solid appeals more to the masses than Death Stranding.
Yeah. So just a couple things in the chat. Ryan Landis, Game Logic, do you remember a while back when I found some odd stuff going on with the initiative? You looked at the website for me and it was out of date or something. Yes, Ryan, I do remember that. And as was the case with the initiative with Forza Motorsport, very often on this show, we will say, hey, there's indications and warnings and something's not passing the smell test, and people like get very abrasive about saying we're concern trolling or these are things to ignore, and then they turn out to not be things to ignore. And then I love Satya Whole Slate Nadella's tongue-in-cheek statement. Stop talking about Death Stranding 2. Did you work for Kojima Studios?
When I think of game creators, like two individuals always come to mind: Kojima and Miyamoto. Always.
So you're not putting Todd Howard up there?
No, I wouldn't put. No, I don't. For some reason, I don't put. Even though we talk about the Elder Scrolls series, but no, I actually don't.
I think okay. If we expand the scope, right, and say top 10 people we're thinking about, I would definitely put him there. I don't like. There's stuff I don't like that Todd Howard's done. I kind of don't like his whole Moxie in its entirety. But yeah, I think I have to acknowledge that he has put together a set of games that has found appeal amongst like millions of, and this is what I'm talking about, right? That sometimes where you slice things differently based on like commerciality versus auteur, like there's no question that the scale of the games that Todd Howard has put together has appealed to a much wider mass than at least Kojima in this phase, right? I mean, I'd have to go back and think about I guess Metal Gear Solid has been pretty big. I'm also not an expert on like which ones he did and which ones he was, he had left Konami for. So
five was his last one.
Okay. But yeah, but I feel like as many detractions as I have for Todd Howard, I can't take him off the table, right?
I mean, I guess now I'm thinking about, okay, if we had to put a list of top 10, I would definitely put Howard, Miyamoto, Kojima. And now I'm trying to think who else.
Well, you got to put the Souls guy in there, right?
Oh, not Idig. What the hell's his name? Miyazaki, yes, absolutely. Or Miyazaki, yes, absolutely. You have to put Miyazaki in there.
Like I feel like that's a solid top 4. Then things get shakier, right? Like, I mean, then it's a discussion, right? There's Pseudo 51 in there. Who is the Smash Bros guy?
Who was that? I don't remember.
Like, I know these guys like by name, face, and association, but I don't have their names memorized as well. I'm sure our chat knows.
Yeah, I would. But see, then I start thinking about studios and not individual creators.
Right. Sakurai is the Smash Bros guy.
Yeah, but I actually, in terms of like designer developers, I would put Sakaguchi-san in there. Final Fantasy.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would.
I think
do we put Neil Druckmann in there?
I think that's definitely the discussion. Here's the one thing I think I could definitely say. I feel like a lot of them would be Eastern, and we would have a smaller number of Western.
So Logic, do you think it's like, because if I think of like Western, right, I'm thinking more. I start thinking more developers, right, outside of Todd Howard. I start thinking of, like the BioWares, just like development houses.
Well, and I'm thinking, well, wait a second, I think I might have to put Cory Barlog up there.
Really?
Not that high. Like
gentlemen, what is up?
What's up,
What's going on, man?
What are we discussing here?
We were just discussing Death Stranding 2, and then we went into like I asked Slow-Mo if like Kojima's the GOAT. And you know what's funny, Slow-Mo? You used to say never go full Kojima, but you know what? Full Kojima is actually not bad.
No, he didn't go full Kojima because he listened to the audience that said, bro, your game is boring. Why am I just watching a movie for the first 3 or 4 hours? Can I play the game? And he made it better. It's balanced way better than it was in the first game. So he didn't go full Kojima. Full Kojima was that nonsense he made with the first game, which I will acknowledge this. I have probably played as much of 2 as I did of 1, and so which is not a lot so far. But what I can say is that 2 is better than 1.
Oh, it's absolutely, Slow-Mo. To your point, he listened to the feedback. The game doesn't start off as slow. You have access to.
He's still overrated.
No, I don't know. I disagree with that. No.
He's so overrated, man.
No.
That's like when people are calling you God Jima and Goat Jima, you're overrated, bro. You are so automatically overrated.
So let me pick your brain here then, Slow-Mo, because we're trying to put together top 10. I think you heard Logic mention Cory Barlog. We talked about Todd Howard. Like who I mentioned we talked about the Souls creator Miyazaki. I put Sakaguchi-san in there, Final Fantasy.
Miyazaki's also overrated, but
see, this is okay. See, this is
he is though. I'm just trying to help you out.
No, he is not. He is not overrated.
He's so overrated. I mean, Miyazaki. I mean, like he's approaching the levels of overratedness that Kojima has. He's not there yet, but he's very, very close.
I disagree with that 110%. I mean, look at
man. People are like Miyazaki.
He created a genre.
He did.
I think
he deserves credit for that.
Yeah,
he deserves a lot of credit for that. But he also does not get any smoke for the overusage. Here's the thing: I'm cool with if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Okay.
What I'm not cool with is these animations are so old that they're older than my kids, and you're still using them in 2025.
I don't
I'm not cool with is
the
the clipping and bug issues that you continue to have that you do not fix for reasons. Oh, it makes the game more difficult. So hey, we're going to do it. What I'm not cool with is the whole you figure it out. at game design, which is not really a game design. It's just you're lazy and people make excuses for
Oh
you.
my goodness.
What I'm not cool with is the fact that he is not a good storyteller whatsoever. Like, I mean, dope characters, dope cinematography, amazing art in his games.
Oh, the art is great. Yeah.
Like amazing epic characters,
great
but
boss.
the dumbest stories ever for these characters. Like some of the stuff you gotta be like, bro, what? How did we get here?
Slow-mo, I don't disagree that the storytelling is like a mystery. Like you have to do a lot of homework.
You gotta do all the work yourself.
Yeah, and then you have to talk to you have to call T-Rock up and talk to T-Rock and have T-Rock break down the story.
Don't ask T-Rock for directions. Just ask him what the story is. Don't ask him for directions because he doesn't know his up from his down. But you know, he's a good guy. He'll help you with the story though.
All right, so okay, so enough of the Miyazaki slander.
I mean, we're talking about like guys out here that are like popular designers and directors. Like I see people in the chat talking about Todd Howard's line behind.
Yeah, but what about? Oh man, you're a tough customer, man.
I am.
Okay. Yeah, let me throw this out the panel quick. Okay, so I'm seeing like Ken Levine.
He's good. He's very good.
I'm seeing Casey Hudson, Peter Molyneux, Warren Spector.
Levine might be too much of a perfectionist, though. He's lucky that Take-Two gives him basically infinite budget, and that just allows him to because like apparently for people who have left his studio, this Judas game. Basically, they've got like 3 playable versions of it that are all different, like almost full games where he just goes, nope, this isn't it, and then he just starts over again. It's just think about it, his last game was BioShock Infinite. How old is that game?
I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, that's his claim to fame.
Right.
Great.
I just think there's just some people that they all have weaknesses. And like these guys aren't all perfect, you know. It's just. What
about someone mentioned Cliffy B?
Oh my god. Huh?
No. I don't know about
why did T-Rock do this twice? I guess I have to answer this question. He's
all right, this is super chat. T-Rock, thank you for the $2 super chat. It says Slobo, how many times did you beat Elden Ring?
5 times.
Oh, well, he can't be that bad if you beat him 5.
How many platforms did you buy? 2. I bought it on 2. Okay. That doesn't mean anything. He's still overrated.
Well, I clearly not. If you beat him 5 times.
No. He's still overrated, man. You know how many times I beat a game? Guess what I'm playing right now?
Well, Slobo, I think
I'm playing Cyberpunk again.
Oh, that's a great game, though.
Yeah, I mean it's an amazing game.
Are you still? By the way, great announcement that Netflix is doing
Edge Runners 2.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that. I mean we probably won't get it until next year, but that's going to be dope when it comes out.
Yeah. Logic, is there anyone else? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We don't know any names of any of these developers at CDPR that did Cyberpunk, but we can acknowledge Cyberpunk is an amazing game. I just think there's a lot of hero worship that goes on in game development now, and I'm glad that like there's no one like, oh my, you know, if one of these people leave right from CDPR, I'm just glad there's just no one that's going to be like, oh, the studio is dead now because so and so left.
like Laidlaw and Casey Hudson and all of them left.
He made the game all by himself. People just be the hero worship in the gaming community is at an all-time high. It needs to go.
All right. Let me Logic, let me ask you, is there anyone else that you can think of that comes to mind, like top 10?
No, and I'm kind of like slow mo because I went and just looked at like a list of like top 100 games of all time, and of course, none of those. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my mic here. None of those lists, right, is definitive. But like, there's so many of these games in this list that I don't know what the name is behind them, and I could certainly go find it, and I'm certain that like I've read like an interview with that creative team or whatever. But the point is kind of like Slow Mo said, but even though that person's name is out there and you can find it, like that person doesn't get like aggrandized, right, in media or with fans. It was kind of funny as we were talking through this, and I was trying to think, would I put Sid Meier in there? And I remember distinctly.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
I remember distinctly 20 years ago or so. I think it was PC Gamer. PC Gamer did a very famous issue that's known for by people who were and it was called the
Oh
Gaming
yes,
Gods.
Sid Meier should definitely be there. Yeah.
Well, and it's a question, right? And so they did this issue. They did this issue called the Gaming Gods, and there were people like inducted right into that class, like Sid, like Romero, Carmack. I forget what Cliffy B's. I think Cliffy B's wife, who I can't remember if she was Cliffy B's wife or Romero's wife, but it was some redhead who started off as like a well-known like competitive gamer and then moved into development. Like she was in there, and then they did a Gaming Gods 2, like the next class or whatever. And so I'm kind of thinking about it in one of the comments Slow-Mo made, which is like, well, how long has that person done a game? And so as we think about compiling this type of list, like there are things like, okay, how prolific was the person? Like, do you get on the list if you did like one game or two games, or is that proliferation part of what gets you on the list, right? That you've done, kind of like we talk about when we talk about football teams, right? We talk about like a football team, like it's not a dynasty if they just all won with like one coach and one quarterback, right? Like you don't really qualify as a dynasty until you do it, with a coach with like multiple quarterbacks, is one perspective to have. So I don't know what criteria we would use, but B, as I'm looking at a lot of these lists that are the top games of all time, I'm realizing we have, kind of like Slomo said, like we don't know who's behind this or what name is associated with this. Like I couldn't, other than the guy who was a writer at what is it, Leslie, the guy who runs the Mind's Eye studio now. Wasn't he the
big yeah, the guy that came from Rockstar? He came from Rockstar, right?
Yeah. But like I don't, but I mean, he was the writer. Like he wasn't the game designer or creator or whatever. So somebody mentioned in the chat, Amy Hennig, and I'm like, to me, like the jury's out on Amy. Like she's, as far as I know, she's been a writer. And this game that she's working on, is she working on a Star Wars game or a Marvel
She's
game?
working on the Avengers game, Marvel 1943, something like that.
Okay. So like to me, I'm not putting that mark on her until she does like her own first game. Like she can be considered a great writer, like as far as I'm concerned. And a great one is the one I can always refer to, that I probably always drag her to a certain extent, or at least people think I do, is Jade Raymond. Whereas like 10 years ago, I would have said, oh yeah, maybe I'd put Jade in there, but I'm absolutely not doing that now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting.
She's the goat at getting studios closed and not finishing games. I mean, that's the only goat Mount Rushmore I put her on right now. I just to kind of reiterate what I was saying before about like not knowing who some of the people are at these studios. Like I right now, my game of the year is Expedition 33. I can't recall any of the names, and I've seen their names multiple times, but I can't recall any of the names of the people that worked on that game. And they've got some true, like the only a handful of them came from Ubisoft. The rest are like complete unknowns or have very little experience or no experience whatsoever in game development before making this game. the music person they got off of SoundCloud, the writer they got off of Reddit. It's like something that definitely needs a documentary, right? To kind of like see how did this like perfect storm of talent come together to make that game. But like, that's just one game. It's like, I'm not going to, anoint them anything or say that the writer for that, I think she did a fantastic job, but I'm not putting her up there with Drew Carpenter now. Like, that's one game, bro. And I think that it kind of to Logic's point when it comes to like Amy Hennig, is like, what has she done since she left Naughty Dog?
Nothing of, in my opinion, significance.
Yeah, and she basically got removed off of Uncharted 4.
Yeah.
Because like it seemed like she was making a retirement game for Nathan Drake, and instead of an actual game that people will want to play, like I mean, if you look at, and I know some people don't care for Jason Schreier, but you look at his book on that game's development. Like, it's like she was trying to be Kojima for a second. And, there's only one Kojima. Only one guy gets to get away with having, the first 4 hours of the game be a cutscene and no one says anything about it. You can't do that. Who are you? And so, like, yeah, Neil Druckmann had to come in and he and the other guy from the Last of Us had to come in and try to fix the game. And, I mean, she still gets credit for working on it, but like it's not really it's not really like the kind of credit that you would want. And then since then, there hasn't been anything since then. It's like been almost a decade. So at this point, you're really like this 1943. I know it's EA and all, and EA is quick to cancel things, but. Mm-hmm. She needs to really get that thing to actually ship, so that we can actually still think of her in that kind of light.
Yeah, that's fair. Gentlemen, real quick. By the way, Slobo, welcome to the show too. Great to have you back here. We actually Forte was here on Saturday, so big shout out to Gaming Forte and DPS Podcast Live every Thursday night.
I'm gonna keep saying this until he knows that I said it. Forte needs to play Death Stranding.
He hasn't played it. He needs to play it.
He needs to play Death Stranding.
Yeah, I think he's busy.
If you're going to be, if you're going to be busy, you're going to have to shut up. Calling games not good until you play it. That's not. It's a very DPS like thing to do to be trashing a game and you didn't play it yet.
Yeah,
and then you say you're going to play it and you haven't played it.
Yeah,
I need Forte to rectify that.
So Slomo, big shout out to Forte. Slomo, I'm actually glad you're here because you are like I kind of consider you the live service guru of sorts. And
oh god,
I don't play many live service games anymore these days. But it's interesting. I was listening to and thank you, Logic, for putting me on to this episode of Broken Silicon with Colin Moriarty, and I forget that. What's the host name again, Logic? I keep calling him Doug, but that's not his name.
Tom.
Moore's Law is dead.
Yeah. Tom?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yeah. So Logic, I thought it was a great podcast, by the way. Great conversation. One of the things that stood out to me though was Sony's strategy with live service. Now Colin made the argument that, hey, it makes sense for them to continue or to pursue live service. I think he said 53% of their digital revenue comes from like 10 games on the PlayStation Store.
Yeah.
But he also said, we've talked about execution on the show.
All 10 games are not games that they make.
Exactly. So he's like, yeah, it makes sense that they're chasing, that live service game that can make them a lot of money. Yeah. And so
why get 30% off of the top games on your platform by a large margin when you could get 100%.
Hey,
Go ahead,
just before we move on, let me twist a pony's nipple. So all you guys out here who have been yelling and
Nipple
screaming that PlayStation should not be doing live service games, this is why I said the strategy wasn't wrong. There's data and evidence that says that was a thing that they should do. Now you can argue about how they went about it, scale, what studios they assigned, all that type of stuff, but we shouldn't be acting.
They've
like
done a
there was-
horrible job of it, but it's necessary for them.
Yep.
They just did a terrible job at it. Yeah, my bad. Go ahead, continue.
No, that was it.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
No,
Brad, sorry.
yeah, you threw me off with something about twisting a pony's nipple. That kind of threw me off. Now Priscilla's the light chest is a twisted nipple. Oh, Mario Heat, that's not appropriate, sir. Now I lost my train of thought, but no. So Colin's talking about that, that 53% of digital revenue for the PlayStation Store comes from 10 games. Makes sense that why Sony is chasing this live service trend, and that they in fact should continue. But he also talked about, I think this is interesting because I don't think it's anything. We've talked about Bungie a little bit on the show. I don't know if you were on the show, Slomo. We were discussing Bungie. Maybe Forte may have been here, but this was recently.
I mean, it's possible. You say Bungie 5 times and Forte shows up like Candyman. So.
Oh my God. Oh Jesus. You're not wrong though. That man he's not playing Destiny now, but he did love him some Bungie for quite some time and put a lot of time into oh my God, now I forgot the name because I'm laughing now. Put a lot of time into damn it, what's the game now? Slow-mo. Now you made me forget.
Destiny, yeah.
Geez, now I forgot my thoughts here. See, this is what happens when you get old.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so we haven't really talked about like this is something like Colin talked about. Like they didn't really stick the landing. Their execution
terrible
has been pretty bad with live
They
service.
also had the wrong mentor for this kind of thing, in my opinion, as well.
Who's that?
And
you talking about?
Bungie, I said this about them, and people took it as hating because I like to poke the bear with Destiny fans, but I was being honest when I said that, like, Bungie's kind of like this is also going to sound like slander, kind of like an idiot savant when it comes to live service, because Destiny was successful for all the wrong reasons. And Destiny did well, but like they made tons of mistakes with the game, but they were able to get away with it because the community just refused to quit. Like they just refused to give up on the game, even though the developer was doing the same things that other live service games had did, and their games suffered for it, and their community left them for it. But when it came to Destiny and Bungie, like they just kept hanging in there. Oh, they'll get it, they'll figure it out. They show a trailer, and then everyone gets hyped again. But it's just like, bro, it's the same. They keep doing the same thing over and over again. When you never get held accountable for your own mistakes, you don't really know what it takes to make sure things work. And so it wasn't a shock to me that, they're killing projects, they're approving projects, and the only one that seemed to be successful, which is Helldivers 2, is a game that Sony didn't market anywhere near as much as the other ones. They so far, I mean, they did an actual direct or some kind of like, focused live stream for Marathon, which looks to be another failure waiting to happen. And they didn't do that for Helldivers 2. I mean, they marketed it. They marketed it well with the whole, leaning into the Starship Troopers. That was very smart. But like, they didn't put the amount of attention to it that they did Concord and Marathon, and it's far, far, far more successful. I just think that they don't really know what they're doing. You know, they're really, they spend a lot of money with Bungie, and they really still kind of made this similar mistakes that they probably would have made even if Bungie wasn't there. Maybe it looked a little differently, but you know, mistakes nonetheless. And I think they're starting to learn, but I just I think when we see PlayStation fans say, "See, this is why you should have never did this in the first place," they're kind of ignoring why they had to get into that in the first place. Is that you do have investors and you do have shareholders, and they want to see more. And even though you're doing great, and even though you're doing awesome in your business, there's always that. So how are you growing from here? And that's why they went into PC. That's why they started to diversify the kind of content that they make in first and second party, because as good as their first party games are, they don't sell like Nintendo's first party games. There is no suggestion that they ever will. And what does better than a Nintendo first party game? The kind of content, the live service content that they see on their own platform that makes them the most money on their platform. So of course they're going to try to lean into that and say, instead of getting that 30%, let me go ahead and get that full 100% of the revenue generated off of that. So you're going to do what you can to make a game that can be a part of that round table of live service, consistent money makers.
Yeah, you get that recurring revenue from those live service games. Yeah, and you know.
Yeah.
So Logic, you were saying something about like you said something to the effect like the fans were angry, saying, "Oh, it was a mistake," but you're still arguing, or you still believe, or you agree with Colin's assessment of, yeah, they should still be pursuing live service games. You say I think you said there's some data points out there as to why. Can you talk about that a little bit, Logic? Why you think Sony should still pursue this?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we have the data, right, and Colin mentioned it right during the show. You know, 50. I think the number is actually 53% of
53. Yeah,
of the revenue is driven by 10 games, which, as Slow-Mo mentioned, that are games that they don't own. We have the Matt Piscatella data point of gamers on PlayStation and Xbox spend 40% of their time in black hole games. So there's absolutely a reason to do it. Now, what I will say is from my own personal perspective, I always believe, even content-wise, right, I believe in diversified portfolios. I don't know that you ever do all of one thing, but I think at some point you have to make an investment strategy that says you're going to have some of a thing. That's a hot thing. I constantly talk about how there's IPs that are gone now that I would love to play multiplayer. I would love to play Resistance multiplayer. I think, while the Killzone games never became the Halo killer that they were purported to try to be, I think it would be super interesting to play a Killzone multiplayer game. Despite all of the yelling and screaming and scratching of eyes out, I think I think Factions is an interesting multiplayer game, but quite honestly, I think the thing that people really slept on was Uncharted multiplayer. So I mean, I think a lot of those IPs, could work, and what I do go along with is the notion that you can't just re-roll those things as multiplayer pack-ins with single player games or even standalone multiplayer games. Like if you're going to do the thing, you've got to do the game as a service thing, I think, in today's market. Now, what is the challenge to that? My hyper criticism of Halo Infinite was never about like the mechanics or the feel of the shooting, right? All those things were great. I even think at a certain point they kind of got progression and cosmetics down. The problem was that the reliability and the consistency of a season-oriented games as a service, they never turned the corner. Because to me, to retain my interest in a game as a service, you can't say, hey, like one of the things I do, well, I've kind of moved on from it now, but when I was like really, really into COD, I constantly would do Google searches of like, when does this season end? When does the next season start? Right. That was just a regular thing of me wanting to be consciously aware of that. And so like you're not turning the corner towards a game as a service when you say, hey, the season starts now, and then you keep kicking the can down the road on when the season's going to end, like mid-season.
Yeah, their seasons were like 8 months.
Yeah, I'm like, what?
That's
What?
not a season. It's like,
and so what are you going to do? You're going to leave. You're going to go play something else that does have a rotation. Yeah. So like that's not effectively turning a corner. And I think a lot of people who disagreed with us would say, well, yeah, but they're giving you this content and they're giving you this event, and I'm like, there's certain things, and I think we actually talked through the metrics at some point, and I kind of built like a package or a model of like, what does a new season launch mean? Like, what am I expecting to get? I'm expecting to get X number of maps, X number of tiers on the battle pass, and some number of LTEs and LTMs, right? That's what I'm expecting. That's the not triumvirate, but the quadrate, right, or whatever it's called. Like, and I am a person who's in every live service game is going to be different. I am a person who's huge on maps. Like, you can give me a bunch of other stuff, but if you didn't give me enough maps, no, right? And probably number 2 would be kind of probably limited time modes. I'm less interested in limited time events, like this whole, like the Beavis and Butthead thing, or the Gundam thing, or like the goofy little.
Slomo cannot wait for that.
No, that Beavis and Butthead crap is awful. Have you seen?
I can't not see it. There's an unskippable little
hideous
intro video. Yeah.
One, Beavis and Butthead haven't been relevant in 30 years. That's the first thing.
They were bad when they were.
Yeah, and you bring them into this, and the actual skins themselves don't look good. They're hideous. Now, you contrast that with like how everything I think they've done so far with Black Ops 6 has been poor, in my opinion. Last year with Modern Warfare 3, things were a lot better. Content was better. But like now it just seems like all they care about is trying to tie into Fortnite does this, but something is coming out, movies coming out, and they're trying to tie in things, but they don't. Yeah, but they don't do it well enough. Like they got the Ninja Turtles and they looked cool, but like
I'm sorry,
they got Squid Game in there.
When you say they don't do it well, do you mean they don't do it well in the sense of like the
there's always something wrong with
the skins look, or it just doesn't? Or you feel like it just doesn't fit within like the COD?
It both of those. A lot of the stuff they do doesn't fit within COD, and then a lot of the stuff they do doesn't look good when they do it.
The skins don't look good,
Yeah. Now you look at something like Fortnite, that like the new Superman movie comes out tomorrow, and Fortnite has a limited time event where you can get the Superman skin with the current Superman outfit. It looks just like the current Superman, whatever his name is, I can't remember. Looks exactly like him. And you can and that event starts Friday. And it's free. You don't have to pay for it. You just need to play and earn your way. Earn your way to get it. Like it's they are the masters of that. And like we see a lot of other, like, and COD's big, COD's huge, but they haven't mastered it. They're trying to do what Fortnite does, and they haven't quite mastered it yet. Fortnite had, when they did the Ninja Turtles, they looked good on both games, but when they did the Ninja Turtles, you could get a bundle of all 4 turtles for $30. When Call of Duty did the Ninja Turtles, they were $20 each, no bundle.
Excuse me, how much?
$20 each.
Oh, I personally think that's too much money.
Yeah. So it's just it's like they don't seem to get it, and this I still say they don't understand how to leverage their own content. Like, why is Master Chief not in Call of Duty by now? Why is Doom Slayer not in Call of Duty by now? These are your own IPs. It costs you next to nothing.
I mean,
to make that work.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, there's also could be things that are maybe planned to release sometime, in the future, maybe.
They ain't doing it. They will not do it. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
The acquisition closed in October of 2023. Like, what are we doing?
They're not going to do it. It's not going to happen.
I'm like with Slow-Mo. It's like why? Like, what possible explanation? I mean, I'm sure there's some, but it's just weird.
Yeah,
like and
the Master Chief is in everything.
Well, he's in the Helldivers 2 video, and that
he's in Fortnite.
Yeah,
Master
that's true.
Chief is in Fortnite. He's in. Someone just said he's in Tony Hawk. They put Master Chief in Tony Hawk. So he's skating, but he can't shoot guns in Call of Duty like he does, like he shoots guns in Halo. I mean, look, if you care about like, matter of fact, how about this, right? Why is Marcus Phoenix not in it? You about to release Gears of War Reloaded. You're going to release it on all platforms that can run it to a whole new audience that are going to play this game and be introduced to Marcus Phoenix and Delta Squad. This is a perfect opportunity to put it in Call of Duty to get some of these COD players to go, oh, this character's cool. I heard this is like an old school Xbox, thing. Maybe I'll try that game out.
Hey, if they're gonna have Beavis and Butthead, why not have Concord?
They won't do. Right.
Seriously.
I mean, you'll probably see Conquer before you see Marcus Phoenix. I'm almost guarantee you they will not put Marcus. It's a slam dunk idea, but these are people who do not play games. They don't understand what gamers care about, and they just continually make stupid decisions.
Wait, who are these people? So I want to clarify who these people are. Are you talking about Activision? Or are you talking about?
You know who they are, man. You know who they are. They just recently laid off, a lot of people and shut down studios, but they're safe. Their bonus is good. It's just
well, let me get back to the Sony thing here real quick, gentlemen. So Lodge, you talked about the why and why it makes sense. But I guess my question is, you guys talked about like someone brought up Matt Piscatella and the what is it, 40% of gamers are on these black hole games that just consume their time. But I guess and I can understand the perspective of I think the ponies, if you will, who say, oh, they shouldn't be chasing this, because like my perspective is like, how do they get? I mean, they gotta put. I mean, I know they have some successful Helldivers too, but how successful? I guess my question is, how successful does this need to be for them, and how do they get people's attention? Like, how do you pull people away from people who are already engaged in some of those games, like the Fortnites, the CODs? Because it seems like it's a crowded market for those live service games.
Yeah, I mean, so like, not all live service games are created equal, right? So like you'll have what you choose to make your live service game about, and I think what they tried to do was try to cover a lot of different flavors of live service. Like Fire Sprite was supposed to deliver like your military kind of shooter, something that would like challenge Call of Duty. That got canceled. Concord was supposed to be challenging, Marvel Rivals and Overwatch, and so that got unlaunched. I think Helldivers it's a sequel to already moderately successful game, so that's like its own thing. And then you got their foray into attraction shooters with Marathon. So I think what they attempted to do was try to cover all their bases, have something out there for everything that is essentially a subgenre within live service games. And I mean that's not exactly a bad strategy. But it's just the execution of it didn't turn out the way that anyone would have wanted. When you've canceled a bunch of those games, some of them looking like they may end up being canceled, like Fairgames, but we don't know. And you've had to delay them because of all kinds of controversies going on with the studio, like Marathon. It's just really kind of a disaster that like very few of them have hit the market and only one of them has been successful once it did. It's execution, man. Like you can plan all you want, but if it's something that people don't want to play, and why don't they want to play it? I think you really need to do better research on what these genres are. For example, Concord actually played pretty well. Like I played it, I had a good time with it. It wasn't a bad playing game at all. I liked it, but in logic, you remember I said this after the beta. I said this. You disagreed. Forte was kind of on the fence, but I said this game, I like it, and I'm gonna play it. This game is guaranteed to fail, and I knew it was guaranteed to fail for a couple of reasons. And none of them have to do with gameplay, and they really aren't reasons that people tend to admit that either they are like this or that gamers are like this. But essentially, none of the characters were attractive. All the characters looked like, I mean, I hate to say it, but like DEI checklist characters. Why do you have like a dumpy fat Indian guy in the game fighting and doing athletic stuff? He's going to break an ankle in real life. Like he looks goofy. He looks silly. Like you have characters that don't look cool and don't look sexy. Now, and look at the successful hero shooters out there. Look at the characters they market in Overwatch. Yes, they have Roadhog, who looks like he's probably, a crossbreed between an actual hog and a human. But they don't market him. He on the roster, but they don't market him. Who do they market? Widowmaker, who no one uses. Tracer, the angel girl, can't remember her name. They market the sexy characters. Marvel Rivals. Do I even need to say it? They got characters from the comics looking like they got BBLs and thigh implants. The White Queen ain't never looked like that. Ember Frost ain't never looked like that. But hey, they making her look thick as hell. And you know what it's about. It's about getting people in the door. It has to play good, but that's just not enough for a hero shooter. And the fact that I saw people in content creation, influencers, trying to pretend like this isn't the case. You can say all you want that that's not what this is about. But it doesn't change the fact that you are one person trying to play the game, and all of the hundreds of thousands of people and millions of people that you want to play the game care about that. Nothing will change that fact. You had devs who were working on the game, who were given feedback about your characters are uncool and goofy looking, and nobody likes them. And it was a very toxic positivity kind of environment that just ignored that kind of feedback until that feedback became the feedback of the game after it launched. Worst game in reception that PlayStation has ever had. and it's not even a bad playing game. It's a complete failure of understanding the market and what the market wants. And then distraction shooters are different. Freaking, they brought in Escape from Tarkov content creators. They told them what would make the game better. 2 years later, they're showing the game, and the same content creators are like, we told them you need proximity chat. The current alpha still ain't got proximity chat. Who plays those games without proximity chat? Like other games within that genre have proximity chat. You're not getting Escape from Tarkov players to leave Tarkov to play Marathon. And then another extraction shooter does a beta at the same time as your alpha and eats your lunch. Just saying, okay, let's get us an extraction shooter. Let's get us a traditional military multiplayer shooter. Let's do a hero shooter. Let's do a battle royale. Let's just do. You're saying you're going to do these things and tasking studios to do them without actually caring about what the gaming community is looking for. It doesn't even give you a chance. So yeah, I don't know what these other ones are being. Fairgames. Jay Raymond's gone. Whether she quit or not, who knows, right? The game hasn't been canceled yet, so I'm gonna assume they maybe have rebooted it. They're still going to work on it. But I hope the failures that they've had so far have informed them of how they need to approach the development and feedback on these games to make sure that, like, when Fairgames comes out, it's a banger. Because I like my multiplayer games. And I love to play a great game.
Yeah.
I love to play another multiplayer game. I sink hundreds and hundreds of hours in it, like I sink hundreds and hundreds of hours into all of them. But if it's going to be a failure, don't get mad at me when I tell you this thing is going to fail. I'm going to play it, but it's going to fail. Because I'm not like being mean or biased or anything. I just, I can read the tea leaves, and the tea leaves say a L. They come up in the shape of a big L, and I know what's good. So
let me ask you, gentlemen. Then do we think that? Because obviously this has had an impact. I think one of the things Colin brought up in the show, and what we're all aware of this, the impacts to their first party studios, Naughty Dog. Who's the one that did Days Gone? Ben Studios. Right.
Yeah. Sony Ben.
Yeah. Sony Ben Studios. Now, they had that project canceled. They're working on a live service game. Naughty Dog was, they were working on their own live service game. Was there another another studio?
Blue Point.
Blue Point. Blue Point's like Blue Point's been like a studio that's done remasters for them and ports.
Mm-hmm.
And they were asked. So do we think that they're going to be able, that Sony might, and I honestly I think you may have mentioned this, Slimo, I have some concerns about Bungie. Based on
I got a lot of
feedback
concerns
from
about
the
Bungie.
alpha marathon and some of the internal issues there. Do we think that
it wouldn't surprise me if Bungie doesn't exist in as Bungie in like 2 years? I mean, they may spin off like a portion of it to still support Destiny, but like they've already taken that Gummy Bears game and made their own studio out of that team. Outside of Bungie for whatever reason.
Yes,
I'm not going to infer why they did that, but I thought that was odd. It wouldn't surprise me if just in the future they just admit, hey, look, man, we screwed that up. This acquisition didn't turn out great, but we're going to course correct this. The people who made that decision, they're not even here no more. And but we're going to, Destiny's not going anywhere. We're going to continue to support that. If they decide the team or whatever they want to call that team, Guardian Studios, I don't know, something stupid, Destiny related, right? We're going to continue to have them work on the game, and they're going to do a Destiny 3, yay, but like as far as Bungie goes, I can really see it just end up shutting it down and keep it moving. A lot of what they wanted them to do, they haven't been successful at doing yet.
Yeah. Go ahead, Logic. I heard you. You were going to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I said the same thing about Xbox with Redfall and Arcane Studios, right? Arcane Austin. I was like, and people who were super hyped, right, on the premise of Redfall. I actually said this originally, although I was wrong. I don't necessarily think I was wrong, because my point of criticism was why the hype. I also said the same thing about Hogwarts Legacy, because that team hadn't done anything of significant success in its past history. But I'll stick on the Redfall topic, and what I'll say is, like, I don't know that we have an evidence of track record of any studio, right, regardless of who owned them or whatever, really successfully making a transition from never having done a multiplayer game, right, to just knocking it out of the park right out of the gate. So I always ask when these things happen, like, if you see a studio who does not have a past multiplayer pedigree being contorted to go do that, what is it that gives you confidence that that is going to turn out well?
Yeah.
And so we have, somebody mentioned Ben Studios, and I got into a bit of a tiff on Twitter with I think one of my former followers who was like, Ben pitched that game. They weren't told to do it. And like, I
hate that kind of response. Can I just say real quick?
Yeah.
That's a very lacking of context kind of like response. Developers and studios pitch ideas they think will get approved.
Right.
They don't pitch ideas that, hey, it's just what we want to do. And then you don't have a care in the world if there's actually going to get approved or not. At Ubisoft, multiple directors said at one point, the reason why so many of the Ubisoft games seem to have a similar game design and a similar format is because the directors knew what leadership wanted. And they weren't pitching ideas that they were just like, why am I wasting my time and my team's time on something that is not going to get approved? So if there is not necessarily a directive that says you have to do a live service game, but that the studio, not the studio, but the platform is trying to do live service games, and a lot of other stuff has not been approved so far, you're going to go pitch yourself a live service game because that's what they want to make right now. That's what they're focused on, and you want to get your project approved.
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah,
there's just some like in it, and I, when we're talking to people on Twitter, right, and when we're talking to people even on this podcast in the chat, as we saw from the one individual earlier, like, we don't know who we're talking to, and I don't know what the context of that person's business experience is. But just like you said, Slobo, I am not going to take an idea to my boss that I know he has no interest in, right? He's not going to approve, right? That's really not beneficial to your career in most cases. Maybe you can do it once, but we have this terminology, you get two but sirs, right? Your boss tells you no, you get 2 times to come back and say but, and then you should probably stop. And I also told this individual, look, when doing a game, you're consuming millions of dollars of capital investment that has to be spent every year, and that capital investment has to be planned. Ben Studio doesn't just get a bucket of money, right, and told, hey, come back at the end of the year and tell me what you did with that. developing a game is a project. That project has to be specifically funded. There's all types of financials wrapped around it. Right? We talked to Falky earlier about how that capital investment has to be amortized and depreciated over years once the asset actually goes on sale or is made commercially available. So just because a studio pitches an idea, or just because like a team of mine brings me ideas, if I say yes, that means that I approved it. Right? Whether I directed it or approved it, like what I get is I get permission to cancel the check and say no. So Bend wasn't going off and doing something of their own accord. Right? They were doing something that got approved by leadership. It's just kind of a ludicrous idea to think that, you know, they pitched and they were doing it and they weren't told to do it. So, and then on top of that, you have the optic of, hey, we just did a game. Leadership isn't really too hot with the game that we did. Leadership disapproved us doing a sequel. So being that I'm here at PlayStation in the house of closing studios when you don't make a thing.
I was about to say this. Right? I was about to say this. Yeah.
Maybe we should probably pitch a thing that we're hearing the buzz is like the new hot thing, right? With the C-suite. So
Yeah.
I don't know. BRAP, I forgot what it is.
No. You are 1000% correct with that. They're not going to be keeping the lights on and you're not working on anything. And at one point in time, they were being a support studio for like, I think it may have been The Last of Us Part 1 remaster. I think it was one.
I think since
there's something,
since their Siphon Filter game they did on, I think Vita, they had mostly been supporting Naughty Dog. I think.
Right. So if they're not working, Sony's going to shut them down. If you pitch an idea and it gets declined, you now have even less time to pitch another idea that you need to have approved. So you don't get to keep infinitely pitching ideas that they're going to say no to, or they may not like indefinitely. That's just not how that works.
Yeah, you got to keep the lights on.
Yeah, man.
Or try to keep the lights on. Yeah, you're not gonna,
Yeah, BRAP, you got a couple of super chats.
Yeah. Let me grab these super chats. Thank you, Logic. I think I missed. Hold on a sec here. Andy Hart with the $2 pound says, Ken Levine can't wait for Judas. That's from earlier conversation. Then Andy Hart with the $2 pound says Wesley Benzies. I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And then Andy Hart, another $2 2-pound super chat says David Jaffe needs to be on the list as well. So this goes back to conversation we had earlier about our top 10 game developers of all time. So thank you for those super chats, Andy. No, but I think I was asking the panel, if you think that PlayStation kind of, if they can execute on this idea of live service, because again, I'm a little more pessimistic about whether or not they could actually do it, because of like how do you grab that mind share from or pull people away that are already in those games?
I mean, that's the challenge for. I mean, I'm not marginalizing your question. Like that's the challenge for everybody who pops.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Game now.
But yeah, I think, absolutely.
I think just to talk about it, just strictly in terms of PlayStation and their portfolio and what they need to own, right? Which was Colin's point, and I think he may have mentioned this, like, in terms of managing your portfolio and what you need to put on offer and why you're making people buy the console or step into the ecosystem. A viable approach is still always weighing, build or buy. And so, maybe the answer is, that they need to partner with someone. I mean, I guess that's kind of a little bit of what they're doing with Marvel Tokon. Is it Tokon?
The fighting game, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I guess. So, we all know what you mean. Go ahead.
Yes. So, and I mean, and Sony has proven, PlayStation has proven themselves pretty good at that, at seeking out partnerships. It's also interesting, and I know that they have like a search team that's going out and like looking for talent and identifying properties. It occurred to me the other day that is it do I want to say it's Bandai Namco? I think maybe it's Bandai Namco that like I think we sleep on the fact that Bandai Namco has a really great eye for finding and picking properties to publish.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so, I don't want to, I mean, I'm not going to get fully out over my skis and talk about like an acquisition, but like, maybe that's something to look at, or like a very strong partnership, or, a venture capital approach, or, some type of partnership that leans on talent, that could help them figure that out. And then major investment, right? Not necessarily doing it entirely in-house.
Yeah, I can see that. Microsoft is on, has games on that list, on that top 10 list, because they acquired them. They acquired Minecraft, they acquired Call of Duty. That's why those games are on that list of live service games that are, eating up the half of PlayStation's revenue. And they didn't cultivate that talent. And I know that's Sony's MO. I mean, they've acquired, a lot, probably the majority of their studios as well, but a lot of the studios they've acquired have been studios that they have worked with extensively before acquisition, or they acquired them a long time ago and kind of grew them up into what they are now, like Naughty Dog. But frankly, I think they have a great eye for like single player action adventure, single player action games, that kind of stuff. A great eye for like finding shift up and really putting effort into making sure that game made it to market and making it a second party game for them. They have an eye for that. They don't have an eye for live service.
Well, let me ask you something, Slobo, because you talk about, I don't mean to interrupt here, but you say they don't have an eye for live service, but like with the game that we were just talking about, I forget what the hell was it
the Marvel
called?
token game.
No, not Marvel. But the Marvel one makes sense because that's a known IP, right? Marvel.
And
but
they're
Concord,
the home of fighting games, so it's just like that's a no brainer for them. They are
they run
Evo game
Evo
market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what about like but I think the issue with if I remember correctly, the issue with Concord is it was in development for a long time, right?
Yes,
like it was like in development
for a while.
So like I don't think for a live service game you can have, I forget, was it like 6 years, 7 years?
It was, I don't think it was 7, maybe pushing 6. I can't remember when it started in development, but I think it kind of switched publishers at one point. It was being published by someone else.
Yeah,
and then
I
they
can't
took
imagine
on that. Yeah,
I can't imagine that like with live service games, like you could afford that length of development, because I feel like with live service games, like there's
you kind of missed the wave.
Yeah, you missed the wave. Exactly. I was trying to think of the wave. Yeah, you missed the wave. Like
and
you can't,
the market gets oversaturated with some things.
Exactly.
Like, if you decided to make a battle royale because Fortnite made a battle royale, by the time it came out the market, it was too late.
It's too late. Yeah, that's my point. So, and that's what I'm trying to. That's what I was kind of racking my brain here. Like what? Like, do they come out with like maybe some kind of hybrid of popular genres, or do they look at? I think like maybe
you got to come out with something that people can identify with, and they know, and it's familiar to them, but it's still unique. Like Marvel Rivals basically copied Overwatch. We can all acknowledge that a lot of the maps look almost exactly like Overwatch maps. It's the same kind of game design. The difference is they got Marvel IP, which is super important and really helpful for them, and this third person perspective. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just say, I think Logic maybe mentioned this earlier, like Killzone, or I forget the other game, Resistance. I mean, maybe leveraging those legacy IPs might be a good starting point for them. Because I
don't think they'll ever do that, because I think they think those IPs just aren't popular.
They're unpopular, but I mean,
they just don't. No one cares about them, so they don't care about them.
And BRAP,
hardcore PlayStation player cares about them, but
Yeah.
Brett, while you're
Yeah.
spitballing ideas, just
Mhm.
a game that I would love to see come back as a live service game would be Mag.
Oh, I remember Mag.
Mag.
And that was actually pretty popular, if I'm not mistaken.
It was. It lost its player base,
Yeah.
but this was in a time before like live service was really live service.
Mm-hmm.
They also
Yep.
need to ditch $40 price tags on their live service games.
Yeah, they got
They
to
gotta do
stop
that,
doing
yeah.
that. Like that's just hurting them. And it's,
Yeah, I think that's
yeah.
like I guess I wonder like if like with Concord, if Concord didn't have that $40 price tag, like would the optics on that game be different? Oh, you know what? It's we always hear, oh well, it's free. Sometimes that's that that's what we hear
I
from
think
gamers when-
it probably still would have failed, but part of the fact that entry price to even try it was because look, the beta,
Yeah.
they had a open beta that nobody played, like barely. Like you look at the numbers of the open beta, it was barely more than the people who ended up playing the game. So it just didn't have interest from the overall gaming community at all, despite being on the most popular in the most popular console and PC. Two different markets at that time. They couldn't get a concurrent 1,000 players playing that game on either platform. It's
I
just
also
and that's the beta and the actual paid version of when it came out. So it's just I think it was kind of part of it that people, even if they wanted to give it a shot, they were like, I'm not gonna spend $40 on a game that I'm not certain is going to be good. But I mean that's potentially like especially when you're comparing this game up against its counterparts in hero shooters, they're all free, and you're not.
Do you? Yeah. How bad was how bad were the Concord numbers? Because I wasn't.
Like,
I know it didn't
like
perform
500 people playing it on
Okay.
Steam, and
Okay.
and we don't quite have the numbers for like exact numbers on PlayStation, but it wasn't much more than that.
Yeah. I think they got to get away from the $40 the $40 price tag. I mean, that's especially when you're up against free to play. Yeah, go ahead, Logic.
So Slow-Mo, for the people for the content creators who were given access to go hands-on Marathon, were they hands-on on the PC version? I mean, was it a mix of PC and PS5, or did they only get PS5 versions?
I don't remember that exactly. I feel like it may have been I know for certain that some of their sessions were all PC, but I don't know if they got any hands-on on the PlayStation version at all. I do just remember a lot of their some of the feedback and the complaints about certain things, and most of them generally enjoyed playing the game. But then I do recall one particular time someone in games media who was playing it for the first time saw a what they thought was kind of interesting, that like the people who had this is like the second time they had a play session for it, where everyone had to be basically in the same room. They weren't doing it like you're playing it from home or anything like that. And they had noticed that all the content creators who had already played the game in the first play session were all on one team, and all the newer players who had never played it before were on another team. And he asked, yo, why did you divvy up the teams like this? And they admitted, oh, because we want to get some cool highlights going for a highlight reel for a trailer. And he was like, so you just gonna make like basically let me be a bullet dumpster getting completely ished on, so that you can have some cool looking highlights to kind of make the game look, not necessarily not like how it actually plays, but like, how do you think the people who you want reporting on the game are going to feel about that? And he said, like clockwork, they got completely ished on, and a lot of the content creators that were on that side who are just getting their feet wet with it and had to deal with that really didn't enjoy playing the game for like the first 2 or 3 hours. So I saw a lot of like feedback like that, and a lot of the things that they said, hey, you should, add proximity chat, like you need that, and or like you need more modes, or or like some of the stuff about extraction shooters that they were doing was a little too I guess harsh when it comes to losing what you lose if you lose, and they just kind of ignored some of those things until they got that same feedback from players when it was in the alpha. So
I mean, the one thing I'll say is, in the leadership team who did the interview for the games division at Investors Week, mentioned, and Herman Hull specifically mentioned, they think that it's key, and I agree with them that, whatever they do with live service, that they get it into early access and get that feedback. Now, the anecdotal pushback to that is, well, that didn't help Marathon. Okay, maybe you can argue that. Maybe you can argue that it is that feedback that caused them to not release the thing this year. So, I mean, there's probably an over and under to that, but I absolutely agree too. I think, particularly if we're of the notion that they seem to not be experts at this, that it would be helpful to get it into early access. My thing is, I believe for live service, you need that in early access on Steam. And yes, you need some on the console, but like I feel like 70% of the telemetry that's going to result in you making it a better game is going to come from the Steam community rather than the people on PlayStation.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, especially if you look at the success of Helldivers 2, that the majority of that is PC players playing the game. I can't remember the percentages, but and I'm sure it varies and changes, from time to time. But it still has been, everything that I've seen has shown it to be a higher percentage on PC than PlayStation. And that doesn't mean every game's going to be like that, but depending on the kind of genre, may kind of determine where, like you would think like a game like Marathon, an extraction shooter, would be more popular on PC than PlayStation.
Yeah,
but then maybe other games, other live service games may be different, like a battle royale or something like that.
Gentlemen, let me grab these super chats here quickly. Street Shadow with the $10 super chat. Thank you, Street Shadow. Says, I think Sony is starting to shift strategy. The partnership with Arc System and Arcs with Arc System on Token and deal they had with People Could Fly for them to make a game based on an old IP shows they're moving differently.
So my one comment on that, because I read it earlier, is I think maybe we need to be a little more deliberate. And I don't think this is what Street Shadow is saying, but I know that there are some people who will. I think we need to be very deliberate about taking an action that a company makes and landing on their shifting strategy. There is such a thing as shifting tactics, right? Or employing multiple tactics to achieve the same strategy. I think the strategy for PlayStation, as they continue to say, is that the console is the center of their business, right? And that's that those are the most highly valued monthly active users that they have. Those are the most highly valued people in the business. Their willingness to do other things, just like I talked about, going to early access, putting its multiplayer games day and date on PC, because that's what makes sense. I don't necessarily know that that's like a wholesale shift in strategy, but those are maybe just prudent tactics. Like I said, I don't think that's what Street Shadow was necessarily trying to say, but I did want to throw that out.
Yeah, I mean, and just real quick, I know we don't need to make it a big point. I think they'll, due to the changes in Microsoft strategy that are kind of coming to into play with like Xbox Ally and being a PC platform and their games being on PC, I think they'll never go day and date on on PC for their single player titles. And I think anything they put on Xbox will always be except for live service, potentially, like Fairgames. We'll see with Fairgames. Marathon was supposed to be released on Xbox day and date. Maybe Fairgames does. But I think when it comes to single player games, those will always be PlayStation console first going forward. Even if it was at some point, it was an idea to potentially say like next generation, start the PS6 generation, they do PC and PlayStation day and date. I think that's out the window now, because what they consider to be important is providing unique value, unique content that you can only play on PlayStation, at least for a time period of time. And with the changes that that have been made, if they go day and date on PC, that's essentially going day and date on the next Xbox. So yeah, it's probably never going to change, as far as I'm concerned. But I could be wrong. We'll see.
Let me grab this second super chat here from Street Shadow with the $5 super chat. Says, Devil's Advocate, $40 price point at mixed results, 50-50. Helldivers 2 was 40 and a hit. Maybe the key is not marketing the game as a live service. Logic, Slimmer, what do you guys think?
I agree with the first half of what he said, but not the second half. And this is
I agree with that. Yeah,
like my agreement and disagreement with the whole like paid game is over under. I've said it on the show before. I don't think any of these things are a silver bullet. I personally don't think it's like $40 price tag, game's going to fail, right? It's a combination of other factors to me. And then the last one, maybe the key is not marketing the game as a live service. Again, I think for this particular part of their portfolio, which I don't necessarily know needs to be like 50% of their portfolio. I think it needs to be some of their portfolio. I don't know exactly how much. I think those things they do absolutely need to market the game as a live service. We talk about a shifting strategy, and I think some thought maybe needs to be given to, do they need to cultivate kind of a different type of user than the type of user that they've historically, like the people who are generating the 53% of their revenue. I might argue that maybe those people landed on PlayStation just out of sheer luck or by mistake, right? Because maybe when a person walks into a store, they're kind of the default. They're kind of like maybe they're the iPhone of the console industry. And so that's worked. I think there's also absolutely been a healthy mix of people who came from PS1, PS2, PS3, and we're kind of like, well, what do I want as a console? Oh, like Uncharted, like Naughty Dog stuff, like Sucker Punch stuff, like Sony Santa Monica stuff. The things that I can only uniquely play there. So I think it's definitely a mix. But I think as we skate forward in the future, they definitely need to figure out a way to appeal to people who are like, I'm gonna play Fortnite, Call of Duty, and Overwatch, but I don't want to spend $1,500 on a PC. In a more direct and deliberate way than they have.
Could they find those people with? And I was just thinking about I'm not saying there's this mass exodus of, well, there has been an exodus of people coming out of leaving Xbox, but could they find maybe some of those people with Microsoft's now being more platform agnostic, maybe grab some of those people there who might be interested in these types of games, and then maybe cultivate a consumer base on even on PC. I think Slimma, you mentioned like maybe focusing on PC or Steam more, or I don't know if that was you, Logic.
No, and I mean, in my mind, it's yes, right. You can do some kidnapping, right? You can get some defectors, but I think it's also more about like starting to message and image themselves with new gamers coming into the fold that PlayStation is a place to play multiplayer games, and obviously some of them have figured that out or decided that or whatever. But I feel like I said, I think it's a matter of being more deliberate and conscious about that, right? Today they solely. Well, this is the weird thing that Colin kind of gives some voice to. Today it's weird to a certain extent if you look at it from a certain angle that they message image in their brand identity, right, is this is the place to come and play cinematic, narrative driven, high production value, single player exclusive games. While concurrently they make 53% of their revenue from games that are absolutely not that.
Right.
And so there's a point in doing that to get that inflection point, right? If people are playing 40% of their time, generating 53% revenue, and they walk into a store, right, and that type of gamer goes, these games are available on both PlayStation and Xbox, and so there's virtually no difference. But for that other 60% of my time, I do want to have like exclusive content to play. That creates that inflection point and the reason why a person makes a choice. But I just feel as like, you know, the rise of the new gamer and demographics change, that, like I said, you gotta figure out a way to market and image yourself to make yourself the attractive value prop, right, to the new gamer coming into the market.
That's a great point, Logic. I mean, there's certainly that new gamer. How do you position yourself in a way that's going to be attractive to them, right? Yeah, Jason Spades, it's going to be okay, buddy.
Yeah, it seems like he doesn't understand what this conversation
Yeah, I don't
is.
think he does
Like,
either. But
we're not talking about they have no competition. Stop console warring for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Take 5 seconds and realize this is not a console war conversation, and then maybe you can actually the fog will lift and you will realize what the conversation is. Because right now, I know it's foggy. You're very confused right now. But whatever you're saying is not what we're talking about.
I will say this, and just to wrap this conversation up and the podcast as well. It's getting close to midnight. I got to get to bed here, but Marathon. I'm not saying Marathon needs to be as successful as Destiny, and I don't think that's what Sony thinks or Bungie. I could be wrong, but I do think if Marathon
could be successful without being that successful.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, and but I do think if this game isn't successful and it's critically panned, rejected by the community, they're going to have a problem with Bungie.
Yeah,
and I wonder. I mean, I know you mentioned the Gummy Bear game, them taking over that, which is kind of interesting, Slow-Mo, to your point. Like, and we don't know all the details. I haven't even read any or seen any speculation or insider information, if you will, on that. But it's going to be interesting to see if that happens. I mean, I heard Colin say he didn't think that they should acquire Bungie. He was kind of against the acquisition. But that may beg the question, should they have purchased Bungie, and then what does Sony do with Bungie now? I do think Sony really gets their hands on Bungie and more or less takes over and probably cleans house a bit. If this game doesn't
chop it up, save what's valuable to save, and get rid of the rest. Salvage what you can, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, again, I think it's good that they took the player feedback and they delayed the game. Sorry. So did you play the alpha? I think you did, right?
For Destiny? I'm sorry, but Marathon.
No, Marathon.
I tried. I couldn't get in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
all right.
Didn't get a chance to play it, unfortunately. I wanted to try it for myself. But I did see people whose opinions in multiplayer games I value. A few of them played it, and it didn't really sit well with them. Unfortunately, they thought it needed some tuning in certain areas for various different reasons. But that doesn't mean they can't fix those things. But I do just kind of like at some point, and I know they kind of feel like they need to just go forward with this regardless. But I feel like there are some things, some negative like impressions and feedback that just can't get overcome. And when you're caught basically stealing content from other people, it's really hard to come back from that. Not impossible, but it's damn near impossible to be able to come back from that. We'll see though.
Anyone want to take this? Jason Spades, by the way, it's a funny profile pic. Most people are not playing COD on Switch or ROG. 67% of COD players are on PlayStation right now. It's going to go up next gen. They don't need live service. They are the go-to storefront.
67% of COD players are not on PlayStation. The majority of COD players are on PC. This has been said multiple times by Bobby Kotick, by the general data. It's the majority PC. I mean, PC alone is had, but well, that part of the data is a little dated. But when Bobby Kotick was at the FTC hearing, he said that PC alone had more players than both PlayStation and Xbox combined.
Well, and here's the thing: even if that metric were true, and again, it sounds like maybe I'll just say maybe you missed the front half of the conversation, right? Even if that were true, do you think that it helps cement PlayStation's foundation and its capital basis to have all of the revenue that would drive being owned by Xbox?
Yeah.
Or do you think maybe to insulate yourself as a business, maybe you want some of that content in your portfolio to be something that you own, to be organic? That is the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation isn't that they need to stop having those games or that those games aren't good enough. Right? This is, I'll try to make this really. You look at business cases, and I often talk about Apple, right? When they brought Steve Jobs back and how they were on the brink of extinction, of going bankrupt. How literally, if Bill Gates and Microsoft had not dropped the cash infusion, they literally were not going to make payroll the following payday. And the fact of the matter is that there are people in leadership at Apple now who were there during that time. And so much of what you see Apple doing is because lots of those people have this never again mentality that they have been quoted about and talked about. That so much of what Apple does is about insulating themselves, owning the stack, not having dependencies beyond themselves. Colin made a great point today.
That's a great point about owning the stack, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Logic.
Nintendo, while being third in gaining revenue, is also one of the most secure of the three console makers.
Yep.
Because they have no dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a matter of anchoring down your base, hunkering down for when things are bad. Let's also not fail to recognize things are not great in the gaming industry right now. And while I have confidence in it proceeding forward, and I don't believe in all of these people asserting that the gaming industry crash and get ready for the rapture, right? But I also say it's a clear indication that you need to be insulated and you need to be defensible. Right now, that player base that PlayStation has is really, quite honestly, the thing that's floating it. Because there is definitely an argument that there's not a lot of marquee properties at volume coming out of the first-party portfolio. And that right now they are surviving on the fact that they have such a huge lead and a lot of the third-party stuff that does well on them. But the point of this conversation is risk mitigation and recognizing that the future may not always be that secure. And so what are the things that they should be doing now to insulate themselves against that? I love people like this who prop this thing up, right? Because this is a thing that, quite honestly, if you're in business and you're in a boardroom, these are the things that people mention that we ask them to step out of the room, right? Because what you're saying is that, hey, the status quo is great. Let's not worry about changing. And honestly, this is the problem that I've talked about with Sony. This is a thing that Sony has historically done. I'm sorry, I said I was going to make this short. This is a thing that Sony has historically done. They have historically gotten on one bull and ridden that bull until that business fails. They have not pivoted. They have not been forward looking. right? Betamax, mini disc. Like they make one smartphone now, right? And the only out of the dozen that they used to make in their portfolio, and the only reason they make that phone is because everybody buys their camera lenses from them for smartphones.
Yeah.
And so they want to field one phone, right, that they can get back telemetry on from people actually using it. Right? They have had so many business. One of the things I commented about at the beginning of this generation was my big fear about PlayStation was that they weren't going to be forward looking. They were going to take these things that Jim Ryan said, which I think there was a note of truth to them, but he said, you know, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We think our players love this. We think our players are willing to pay. And thank goodness he was actually doing something different behind the scenes than what he was saying. But that's my one fear with PlayStation is that they will be stodgy and they will be like the Sony Corporation has historically done, and they won't pivot and they won't be forward looking.
And Jason, I think what you need to understand too, I think part of that pivot, that's not what he said. If it's I mean, I think to your point about protecting themselves, logic. You know, this. I mean, what does PlayStation account for majority of their of PlayStation? Sony's business, their revenue. I mean, it's a big piece. But to your point about it doesn't matter if it's a multi-plat game, it doesn't matter who owns it. I think what we said here, maybe you missed the conversation earlier, is that I think Logic, you mentioned.
I don't think he understands what we mean by revenue.
They own. I mean, you're not now you're getting 70% of a cut if it's somewhere else, right. Or you're getting 100% cut on your platform.
Yeah, it's just I don't think he understands that it's more money if you own it versus if you don't own it. It's on your platform, and the revenue that you generate that you get 30% of, 30%. So like let's say Jason, you have $1 and you get 30% of that dollar, you get 30 cents. Okay? Trying to break it down for you. So they get 30% of every dollar that is generated on their platform by these games. And it's 50% of their revenue. So think about this for a moment. 50% of the revenue that they have earned comes from 30% of these games. They see the 70% going out the door to other platforms, and they say, man, what if we were keeping a lion's share of that? How do you do that? You either make a game that can be a part of that fraternity of games, or you go buy a studio or IP that's doing that, which is what Microsoft has done. This is what we're talking about. They're doing great, and we're not saying they're not going to do great. What we're saying is that that's never enough for these corporations. They always want to be doing better. They always want to be doing more. And when it comes to making more money, they're seeing what the vast majority of players are playing on their platform by a large margin, and they say we need to make that.
I don't know if I can reply to him anymore. Jason, there's
such a thing as you can do multiple things. Like you and Ply are making like this. Maybe Ply. Often I junk you into some other bucket, so maybe that's wrong. But Jason, the argument you're making is everything's fine and they don't need to change anything. And I hope that we acknowledge, as I frequently say, the gaming industry has evolved consistently, right? It's always evolving and has been since the 70s. So your argument is that they just need to keep doing the same thing they're doing, failing to recognize that, hey, 53% of their revenue is being generated by other people, which means they're investing money, right, to make games to earn some subset of the 47%. Because that 53% is just the top 10 multiplayer games, right? So they're not even making all of the money out of that 47%. They're making some subset. And what did we see with the rise of microtransactions? We saw that it started and then it crept up over time until eventually lots of the big publishers, EA and Activision, that's where the majority of their revenue was coming from. Ditto for free-to-play games, right? So what happens when that percentage keeps increasing and gets higher than 53%? What is the point at which you decide that maybe you need to do something different? 60%, 67%, 75%? So, and then your question, and I'm sorry, you gave us an LOL before, which I read as nonsense and being childish. So maybe I'm about to start treating you as such. You asked the question about you asked the question, how does Steam make money? Steam is an entirely different business than PlayStation. They don't build hardware primarily. They've got the Steam Deck, which has sold like single-digit million numbers of
and they only sell it out of their own store.
They are not a platform owner.
They're different. They're different ecosystems. Different ecosystems, but
different business. So I think we've entertained enough of that line of questions.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. He's just rattling off fanboy talking points at this point.
Being like an Xbox fan and rattling off talking points.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. Just he's channeled his full pony. He's got his click clacking right now. It's the same. You're right, Logic. It's the same talking points, but just from the other side. Crazy.
He heard it from someone else who actually had a point, but he's repeating what someone else has said, and he doesn't get it. So it's kind of sad, but.
Yeah, doesn't understand why Sony might want to diversify their portfolio of games, and
And just before we wrap that up, right? Because I know what people are going to say in the comments. Oh, you guys are being jerks. You're responding. No, again, you can come in here and you can disagree, but when you come in here and say, blah 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 blah, what are you guys talking? What the f are you guys talking about? And you give us feedback and LOL as if you're laughing at like that's the point where we're not having a commensurate, respectful conversation.
Like I have no problem explaining the point of our conversation or the point of what we're talking about, but when you start acting childish or immature, disrespectful, or frankly sorry, but you're acting like you're too dumb for this conversation, then I treat you as such. And I don't know, maybe you're like 12, which that would make sense. And then in that case, I feel bad that we even, talking to you at this point. And why are you even up right now? It's 12 o'clock at night. Go to bed, kid. Where are your parents at?
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, I think we've explained multiple times why what you're saying does not relate to what we're talking about. And if you still don't get it, then I'm sorry. Maybe get your dad to explain it to you.
Yeah, Corey, you're going to have to go back and listen to the show earlier. We're about to wrap up. Corey's asking a question. He just got here.
Hey, Brad, before we wrap up, I do want to throw out two data points about things that absolutely. I think the gaming community severely gets wrong. And they're both Xbox points, so people who are Xbox fans, I apologize if these hurt your feelings. But sometimes facts hurt people's feelings. That's a you problem, not a me problem. One of the things that I wanted to point out is this whole topic of mass unionization from the acquisition. It was going to lead to better treatment of the employees, and people were going to be protected, and they were going to be allowed to unionize. One data point that I found this week when I ran some numbers is, to date, Xbox has laid off more employees since the acquisition than the total number of employees at Xbox that have joined unions since the acquisition.
Of course.
And then the other data point that I wanted to bring up is, much ado is made about this 500 million MAU number. I think one thing that all of us got bamboozled on is we regarded that as like a successful trajectory for Xbox and a thing that they had achieved. They didn't achieve that. It's absolutely common sense that they would have been over 500 million MAU because they bought it. Activision by themselves were at 500 million MAU in July of 2023 before the acquisition closed. 92 million were on COD, 26 million for Blizzard, 238 million for King in July of 2023, 356 million MAU. and the entirety of the company of Activision was already over 500 million now. So people latch on to that number, particularly when they try and argue with us about the difference between that and the ARPU of the PlayStation consumer, and make it like it's a gotcha or aha moment. And I'm like, no, they were already at 500 million MAU. By the way, another 170 million of those MAU are on Minecraft. So I think there's a little mystification of the 500 million MAU number, as if it has way more significance than it actually does. Because at the end of the day, those numbers have not yielded a greater change in revenue, as far as we know, outside of linearly adding the Xbox revenue plus the Activision revenue. And actually, because they've been taking write-downs, that revenue actually doesn't match what that sum would have been. That sum would have been to the tune of $27-28 billion. But in the year that the acquisition closed, I think they reported like 21.5 billion, which was less than it should have been. But that's because of expenses aggregated and write-downs that they've taken in the division. Sorry, I'm done, Brett.
No, that's a great point. I've been seeing that 500 million be thrown around again. It seems to rear its ugly head every once in a while, and people tend to forget that ARPU is probably more important than monthly active users. But I had someone tell me otherwise, or this week, or last week as well, last weekend. But anyhow. All right, gentlemen, I want to first thank everyone in the live chat. Thank you everyone for stopping by. Do the YouTube thing, hit the like button, subscribe, and also want to thank Slobo, who's able to join us this evening. Slobo, always a pleasure, sir. Really appreciate it. And you have a show tomorrow night.
Sure do. DPS podcast, that's Damage Per Second podcast on the DPS Gaming channel. Tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Me and Gaming Forte, who don't play games, Tay, and we're gonna have a good time. So come on through.
Did you call him Tay?
Yeah, I mean it rhymed. Don't play games, Tay. But why, see, I shouldn't have to explain it, Brad. Now I just made.
You say he doesn't play games? He does play games. I'm confused.
He ain't played Death Stranding. Until we play Death Stranding, he ain't playing games.
Okay, I got you. You gotta say Bungie 5. What do you say? You gotta say Bungie 5 times he appears.
Yeah, Bungie.
Yeah. Would it be funny if he jumped in the show? I would laugh. That's funny. No, Slobo, always a pleasure, man. Thank you, and please check out DPS tomorrow night. And also, big thank you to Falke, who joined us earlier this evening. A big shout out to him. And Logic, always a pleasure having you on as well. Please, if you want to be found, let everyone know they can find you. And you do have a show on Sunday nights as well.
Nope, I don't want to be found. Jason Spades insists that what everything he said made sense. Centurion of God was certain that he was correct. Every day on Twitter, I'm told that everything that everybody else says is the absolute truth, so nobody needs to follow me. They already know everything.
Fair enough. But no, Logic, great having you on. Great conversation as always. And we'll be back next week. Now I'm back to Wednesdays again, by the way. I think I may have mentioned this this past Saturday. I had to change because of sports and family activities, things like that on Friday. So back to Wednesday nights again. So there will be some nights that I do the show at 8:00, but probably going to be 9:00, which is what we've always traditionally done for BRAP. So, but everyone, enjoy the rest of the week. Have fun playing video games, because ultimately that's what it's about. If you have a PlayStation, you should be playing Death Stranding 2. That goes to you, Forte, if you're listening to us. Slomo thinks you need to play that like today. So on that note, we are out. Thank you so much, everyone. We will catch you next week.